morning, everyone. We will be starting in just 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Please take your seats. We will now be starting our session for this morning. Before we start our ministerial interactive discussions of today, please allow me to make a few housekeeping announcements. First, we kindly invite participants to turn off their mobile phones to ensure that there's no disturbances during the discussions. Please also note that in this room we do have simultaneous interpretation, and you will probably need it. In addition to that, please also note that today's Ministerial interactive panel discussions will be streamed. You'll find the channel on YouTube if you click on our homepage. When taking the floor, we kindly ask you to speak slowly and clearly in order to help ensure interpretation is well understood and the streaming goes well. We also remind you that time is quite tight. We have a lot of requests for the floor today, and therefore we do encourage you that when you do take the floor, you keep to the time that has been allotted for your intervention. After this session, when we close at 1 o'clock, there will be a lunch hosted by the German government and the IOMC. So you don't need to leave early this venue. Everyone, all the ministers and deputy ministers that are invited to the lunch will also be going over to the lunch across the street. You will need to follow the red carpet for that also. So thank you very much, and I will invite Mr. Payet, who will be moderating this morning's session.
Thank you very much, Maria Cristina. Good morning. I hope you had an enjoyable evening last night and are ready for today's panel discussions. I would like to thank you all for your active participation and engagement during yesterday's very active roundtable discussions which happened in the building next door in Varanbe. Before entering into the ministerial interactive discussions, we will hear summaries of the key messages emerging from the roundtable discussions yesterday. This morning, we have with us on the panel the following three distinguished panelists who will each be introducing the summary of the key messages arising from the interactive discussions on our three sub-themes that we introduced yesterday. I have the honor to invite Ms. Mona Ali Mohamed Ahmed, State Minister of the Republic of Sudan, followed by Ms. Catherine Schneeberger, State Secretary of the Federal Office of the Environment of Switzerland, and His Excellency Mr. Bhupender Yadav, Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change of India. Without any further ado, allow me to invite Her Excellency Ms. Mona Ali Mohamed, State Minister of the Republic of Sudan, who will be introducing the summary of key messages from the interactive roundtable discussions on pollution. Madam, allow me to invite you.
بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Ministerial Roundtable number 7 and 8, 9 and 10 on pollution. Robust regulatory framework, institutional capacity, and monitoring system, particularly in developing countries and urban cities, are essential for monitoring hazardous chemical waste and pollution, coordinating implementation of M&As and improved enforcement mechanism must be priorities at all levels. Effective implementation of MES requires aligning global commitments with national strategies, fostering cross-ministerial coordination, and ensuring inclusive stakeholder engagement, including health, agriculture, and environment sector. A strategic action plan should integrate circular economy, ecosystem restoration, and pollution reduction targets. 3, industrialized country must support developing nation and small island developing state through fair trade, technology transfer, and responsible waste practice, tackling transboundary pollution and environmental injustice demand global solidarity and ethical cooperation, especially as waste follow cross borders. Public understanding and engagement are fundamental to reducing chemical risk and waste impact, empowering community through education, awareness, and clear communication promotes an inclusive solution across agriculture, health, and urban system. Greater collaboration across international conventions and Basel, stockholder, public and private, will creating synergy, instrument implementation, and ensuring progress on biodiversity, climate, and chemicals goals. Sustainable chemicals and waste management depends on accessible, adequate, and a long-term financial support. Financing mechanism must be designed to support local authorities and development and systemic transformation on par with climate-related finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for this very comprehensive summary. Now I have the pleasure of inviting Her Excellency, Ms. Catherine Schneeberger, State Secretary of the Federal Office of Environment of Switzerland, to report on the second roundtable on circularity.
Excellencies, dear colleagues, I'm pleased to summarize the main points of yesterday's roundtable discussions on circularity. To enable evidence-based decisions and enforce compliance, countries must invest in robust data systems, digital trade permits, and traceability platforms. These tools should link waste producers, handlers, and recyclers, supporting transparency, circular economy exchanges, and compliance with international conventions. Extended producer responsibility systems must be embedded in national laws with clear oversight and modulated fees to reward sustainable product design. Combined with economic instruments like landfill taxes, recycled content requirements, and green procurement, EPR can fund collection, recycling, and outreach while reducing reliance on public financing. Effective circular economy policies require harmonized, enforceable legislation that incentivizes private sector participation. Establishing circular economy councils and involving businesses in regulatory design will ensure practical, scalable implementation aligned with BRS convention goals and national development plans. Lasting change depends on informed and engaged citizens. Governments should launch national behavior change programs, embed circularity in education, we talked about kindergartens, and promote grassroots initiatives that create local jobs, build trust and make sustainable practice a visible and desirable norm. In order to transition from linear to circular systems, countries, especially low and middle income countries, need financing for research and development, sustainable infrastructure, and technology transfer. Targeted international support must address gaps in waste processing, hazardous material recovery, and emerging streams like e-waste, textiles, and solar panels. Successful implementation hinges on skilled workers and strong institutions. Capacity building must span policy, enforcement, and technical operations, from ministries to municipalities to customs and waste handlers, to ensure the quality and safety of secondary materials and protect health and ecosystems. Hazardous substances, waste, and chemicals know no borders. Implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm, and where relevant, the Bamako Conventions should be synergized with regional infrastructure, knowledge sharing, and harmonized standards enabling efficient collaborative solutions. Collaborations between chemicals and waste instruments are also crucial. Mobilizing circular economy investment requires combining fiscal tools, private capital, bonds and guarantees, and international funds such as the GEF. Social responsibility and enterprises and public-private partnerships must co-invest to fill funding gaps and scale circular solutions. A well-designed circular economy reduces pollution, boosts economic resilience, and reduces dependence on virgin extraction, for example, from artisanal mining. It must be inclusive, ensuring benefit sharing, local economic development, and alignment with environmental justice and sustainable development goals. So these were the main points of the 3 roundtables about circularity. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, State Secretary. I now have the pleasure and honor to invite His Excellency, Mr. Bhupender Yadav, the Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, India, to introduce a summary on means of implementation. Roundtable. Excellency.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am reading the summary of key message from the interactive roundtable ministers' means of implementation. To address growing pollution challenges, countries must mobilize predictable international financing while unlocking domestic resources through progressive taxation. Environmental levies like carbon taxes, for example, and polluter pays mechanisms such as extended producer responsibility EPR, innovative financing tools such as green bonds, debt for nature swaps, chemical certificates, and green loans should be scaled up to attract private investment and provide sustainable funding, especially for countries with limited fiscal space or those in crisis. Governments must foster conditions that attract and regulate private investment through coherent, transparent standards, clear technology frameworks, and incentives and mandates, aligning environmental objectives across ministries and ensuring that each sector measures and reduces its own environmental footprint will support accountability and systematic change. Environmental governance requires strong institutions with mandates to coordinate across ministries and sectors. Countries should redesign ministerial roles, improve interagency cooperation, and invest in capacity building, particularly in vulnerable or post-conflict nations. Empowering environment ministries to lead cross-sector actions and breaking institutional silos are critical for effective implementation of MEAs and national strategies. Effective policies and financing depend on reliable data systems, evidence-based planning, and transparent monitoring. All sectors must track their environmental impact, while countries should map actual chemicals and waste needs against spending to guide financial planning. Public communication and trust are enhanced through transparency, enabling stronger participation and policy support. Addressing pollution, climate, and biodiversity loss requires integrated planning and funding models that go beyond sector-specific solutions. Programs like the GEF's integrated approach should be expanded to break funding silos and promote systematic change with policies that shift behavior and market systems rather than focusing on individual products or interventions. Regional cooperation can overcome national limitations by enabling shared infrastructure, joint training, and knowledge exchange. Establishing or empowering regional centers can support implementation, capacity building, and the pooling of technical resources. Regional collaboration reduces duplication, ensures consistency, and helps smaller or landlocked countries benefit from collective solutions. Countries in conflict or with limited institutional capacity require specialized support, including direct access to funds, conflict-sensitive implementation, language assistance, and technical partnerships. Addressing these barriers ensures no country is left behind and strengthens global implementation of chemical and waste management goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We've now reached the end of the presentation of the outcome of yesterday's roundtable. I would invite our distinguished guest to leave the podium. Now, before we get into the order of business, I would like to introduce you to someone who's been very, very active in our BRS conventions. He has tirelessly negotiated, primarily in the Stockholm Convention, but also was the primary motor also behind our 2019 amendment to the plastics, plastics amendment. And today is his birthday. And he doesn't know that I'm going to speak about him. He's going to be 50 years old today. And everybody knows him as Thomas or Sverre. So please, let's give a round of applause. Thomas from Norway. Happy birthday, Thomas. The ministerial panel discussions will consider now the sub-themes from a regional and global perspective. Each discussion is scheduled to have a duration of about 40 minutes, so we're running against time here. So I will ask the panelists to be as brief as possible so that we can go through all the three panels that we have planned for today. So following a short introduction by the moderator, each panelist will be invited to make a 3-minute statement. And after the panelists have spoken, the panel moderator will open the floor for interested ministers and deputy ministers to make very short interventions. So for those sitting in the auditorium, please indicate by pushing the button in front of you that you would like to make an intervention. And the moderator will give you the floor in order of request. We will try as much as possible to accommodate your preferences, but please bear with us as we are running against time this morning and we have three panels to go through. So without any further ado, allow me to introduce our moderator for the first interactive panel, my good friend and colleague from the Ramsar Convention, the Secretary General of the Ramsar Convention, Ms. Musonda Mumba. Musonda, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to be moderating this amazing ministerial session with such incredible people. We're going to crisscross around the world, all the way from an island state, large ocean state, Mauritius, China, Côte d'Ivoire. We're also going to go to El Salvador and also to Kyrgyzstan. So welcome, panelists. I'm very, very excited. We're going to be discussing, looking at the element of pollution, but also how it intersects within different multilateral processes. Yes, we are here discussing the BRS, and thank you very much, Rolf, for your introduction. We're discussing the BRS and the issue of pollution, but how does it actually connect to issues that are related to the multilateral process, such as the Paris Agreement, the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and also some other related frameworks. So, without further ado, I just want to introduce the panelists very quickly. We do have here to my right His Excellency Minister Fernando Lopez, who's the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources from Government of El Salvador. Welcome. We also have Madam Asel Remkulova, who is the Deputy Minister of Natural Resources, Environment and Technical Supervision from the Kyrgyz Republic. Welcome. We also have His Excellency right here next to my left, Minister Conan Jacques Assahore, who's the Minister of Environment from the Government of Côte d'Ivoire. Welcome, bienvenue, messieurs. We also have Her Excellency, Madame Joanna Marie Berenga, who's the Junior Minister of Environment, Solid Waste and Climate Change from the Republic of Mauritius. Bienvenue, Madame. We also have, lastly but not the least, Your Excellency, the Vice Minister of Ministry of Ecology and Environment, Mr. Li Gao. Welcome. Shishi. So, starting with Your Excellency, Minister Lopez. Yesterday, we were at the roundtable, the ministerial roundtable. I was incredibly impressed by the conversations in those roundtables. But what I also found very interesting is the aspects of the conversations that you brought to the table in relation to how you emphasized El Salvador's role. So we want to hear from you, how have you been significantly affected by some environmental challenges? And how do these environmental challenges, particularly with a lens on pollution, through the BRS thread, how does that connect to the Paris Agreement and also to the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework? Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Hola. Thank you very much. Yesterday's roundtables were a great experience. We got to share all of our experiences, and we departed from one single premise. Everything is connected. I mean, we are right here talking about pollutants, about the BRS framework, but we cannot forget climate change and the effects of climate in our region especially. We have a massive, massive change in how the rains behave, how the weather behaves, and that affects all aspects in life of economy. We cannot forget biodiversity, for example. So that's what the BRS is about, you know, to assess and to understand that everything is connected, and we cannot forget about declaring more protected areas, for example. We cannot forget about our early warning systems that warn us when something else is coming. So basically, the end of all this is to protect human life, to ensure that the citizens whom we serve are protected and live in a country that they deserve. So basically, we spoke about that. Also, regulation, very important, having clear laws, clear rules in order for the economy to grow, for the environment to flourish, and for the citizens and all the world to work together. And finally, one very important aspect, the working together as a world, you know, as a country. You can do so much, but if we unite, if nations unite also to access financing and to make regional projects that can bring more into our countries, that would be better. So basically, that was it. Everything is connected, regulation and working together.
Thank you very much. You raised the issue of multilateralism, which is absolutely important, working together. I think this is why everyone is here, and I really want to thank you on the point of regulation, because I think this is an aspect that is very critical and something that came up a lot in the discussions and the conversations yesterday. I want to move very quickly to Your Excellency, Madam Raimkulova. I was actually on the table with you yesterday and just listening to what the government of Kyrgyzstan has done in a lot of the regulations and the work. You're working a lot on the issue of obsolete pesticides. You're also working a lot on the issue of POPs, the persistent organic pollutants. Can you give us some insight in terms of, what lessons can be drawn? And you gave some impressive examples yesterday from your country's issue of addressing these challenges, particularly in relation to the BRS conventions, but as well as the biodiversity framework. You have the floor.
Спасибо большое. Добрый день, уважаемые участники мероприятия, коллеги, дамы и господа. Позвольте выразить глубокую благодарность секретариатам конвенции за возможность выступить по проблеме устаревших пестицидов, содержащих СОС на сегменте высокого уровня. Для Кыргызской республики проблема устаревших пестицидов продолжает оставаться одним из высших приоритетов правительства Кыргызской республики. Основными источниками СОС в Кыргызской республике являются устаревшие пестициды, оставшиеся в могильниках и складах со времени Советского Союза. Эти химикаты долго сохраняются и в почве, и в воде, как вам известно, загрязняя экосистемы и нанося долгосрочный вред биоразнообразию. Мы осознаем, что такие загрязнители особенно опасны в условиях нехватки ресурсов для их безопасной утилизации. В 2003 году, почти 22 года назад, была проведена первая инвентаризация стойких органических загрязнителей. В 2021 году Кыргызстан провел последнюю инвентаризацию, включая устаревшие пестициды и ПХБ. По результатам инвентаризации было выявлено около 5000 тонн ДДТ на 3 могильниках и 62 бывших складах сельхозхимии. Требуются срочные меры по утилизации устаревших химикатов. В 2014 году при поддержке мирового сообщества была проведена переупаковка устаревших пестицидов, около 200 тонн ДДТ в специальные емкости для их перевозки и уничтожения. Однако, согласно Базельской конвенции, отсутствует возможность вывоза этих химикатов из-за запрета других стран на транзит опасных отходов через их территории. На сегодняшний день в Кыргызстане нет приемлемой и безопасной технологии уничтожения устаревших пестицидов. В связи с этим была начата работа по перезахоронению устаревших пестицидов, что является временным решением существующей проблемы. Когда-нибудь придется их снова выкопать и утилизировать. В рамках реализации проекта ФАО-ГЭФ «Управление жизненным циклом пестицидов и уничтожение СОС пестицидов в Центральной Азии и Турции» было предусмотрено финансирование строительства современных складов для хранения устаревших пестицидов в Джалабадской области и в Чуйской, но, к сожалению, проект пока не достиг этой цели. Также при поддержке Европейского бюро ЮНЕП и Глобального экологического фонда в Кыргызской республике и Таджикистане реализуется проект ЮНЕП-ГЭФ «Демонстрация нетермической обработки отходов ДДТ в Центральной Азии», где планируется и утилизация отходов в могильнике Сузака. Этот проект продлен до 2027 года. Планируется выделение $1,5 миллиона на рекультивацию загрязненных участков вокруг бывших складов химикатов. В рамках данного проекта разработан план действий по управлению опасными отходами устаревших пестицидов в Кыргызской Республике на 25 и 35 годы. В 2024 году Кыргызстан запустил также процесс пересмотра национальной стратегии и плана действий по сохранению биоразнообразия. Принятие Кунмин-Монреальской глобальной рамочной программы действий стало для нас ключевой отправной точкой пересмотру национальной политики, целевых задач и ориентиров. Цель 7 глобальной рамочной программы по биоразнообразию Кунмин-Монреаля по сокращению общего риска от пестицидов и особо опасных химических веществ как минимум наполовину к 2030 году будет достигнута через выполнение плана действий по устаревшим пестицидам. Какие инструменты регулирования или механизмы для предотвращения загрязнения особо опасными пестицидами? В соответствии с национальным законодательством Кыргызской Республики планируемые виды деятельности, связанные с обращением с опасными отходами, включая их выемку, переработку, захоронение, размещение, утилизацию, подлежат проведению оценки воздействия на окружающую среду и могут реализованы только на основе положительного заключения государственной экологической экспертизы. Любая утилизация СОС как на территории, так и ее за пределами должна соответствовать стандартам, установленным международными химическими конвенциями. Все работы по утилизации выполняются в соответствии с едиными стандартами, независимо от места утилизации. Это инструменты регулирования и механизмы, которые должны быть важными при принятии любых решений. Чтобы Кыргызская Республика не использовалась в качестве полигона для испытания непроверенных технологий обработки или утилизации, предпочтение должно отдаваться технологиям, имеющим опыт соответствия стандартам. Также необходима пропаганда использования органических пестицидов и натуральных препаратов, минимизирующих воздействие на окружающую среду и здоровье населения. Ну, все, наверное. Да? Окей, спасибо.
No, thank you so much, Your Excellency. It's actually very impressive to hear you talk about this unification of standards and why that's important to resolve some of these issues, but more importantly, the connection to making sure that these obsolete chemicals are disposed of well, because they on implications on biodiversity as well as on communities. Your Excellency, Minister Jacques Assare, you come from Côte d'Ivoire, which is a predominantly agrarian country. We would like to hear from you how the BRS conventions are supporting you in dealing with the pollution aspect, particularly from the agriculture sector and also from household waste. Vous avez la parole.
Bien, merci Madame la modératrice. Je voudrais avant tout saluer le secrétariat de la Convention pour cette opportunité qu'elle donne à mon pays, la Côte d'Ivoire, de partager son expérience sur la mise en œuvre de ces conventions et ce que concrètement mon pays a fait dans ce domaine-là. Je voudrais aussi associer à ces remerciements le FEM, qui nous a permis de développer un certain nombre de projets entrant dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre des 3 conventions. Je vais citer le projet sur la gestion rationnelle des polluants organiques persistants. Je vais citer le projet Planet Gold que nous avons mis en place pour éliminer l'usage du mercure dans l'orpaillage artisanal et la deuxième phase de la gestion des PCB pour l'élimination de 1000 tonnes d'huile de carcasse. Ce sont des projets concrets que nous avons développés grâce au soutien du FEM. Madame la modératrice, je voudrais indiquer qu'en ratifiant ces 3 conventions, la Côte d'Ivoire a marqué son engagement ferme dans la dynamique mondiale de prévention des risques chimiques et de gestion des déchets dangereux. La Côte d'Ivoire est malheureusement l'exemple typique d'un des plus graves scandales environnementaux que le monde ait connu à travers le Probo Koala. De triste mémoire, chacun d'entre vous le sait. Et depuis cette date, nous avons pris des mesures fortes pour endiguer ce genre de phénomène, notamment en mettant en place un cadre réglementaire robuste, spécifiquement dédié à la gestion des déchets issus des équipements électriques et électroniques, ainsi que les pneus usagés, appuyés par des arrêtés d'application. Nous avons également adopté un nouveau code de l'environnement plus strict qui impose des obligations de transparence aux producteurs et importateurs et renforce les sanctions contre les trafics illicites des déchets. Nous avons mis en place la responsabilité élargie du producteur dans les secteurs des déchets d'équipements électriques et électroniques et des pneumatiques usagés. Nous avons également mis en place un comité interministériel dédié au mouvement transfrontalier des déchets, complété par des programmes de formation pour les agents qui sont en contact avec ce type de déchets. À ces efforts s'ajoute également l'acquisition d'un laboratoire mobile pour réaliser des analyses in situ, renforçant ainsi la capacité d'action du pays. D'autres mesures significatives ont été prises, notamment la limitation de l'âge des véhicules importés, qui aujourd'hui est limité à 5 ans, l'interdiction de l'exportation de la ferraille, la création d'unités de recyclage des métaux et l'incinération contrôlée des déchets dangereux. Madame, concernant le secteur agricole, nos actions s'appuient sur les conventions de Rotterdam et de Stockholm. La première action que nous avons mise en œuvre concerne l'adoption d'un texte encadrant l'homologation, l'importation et l'usage des pesticides. Un comité interministériel d'homologation a été mis en place et des comités locaux de lutte contre les pesticides obsolètes ont été installés sur l'ensemble du territoire national. La Convention de Stockholm, quant à elle, nous a permis le lancement d'un projet d'élimination des pesticides obsolètes et de leur emballage. Nous avons introduit également des alternatives plus sûres à ces pesticides dangereux. Et avec des programmes tels que le RED+, une transition vers une agriculture zéro déforestation et l'usage de biofertilisants réduisent ainsi notre empreinte carbone. Il est donc clair que la synergie des conventions BRS produit des résultats concrets en Côte d'Ivoire. Néanmoins, des défis subsistent, notamment en matière de sensibilisation, de renforcement des capacités et d'appropriation par les populations. Donc voilà, pour conclure, je dirais que je pense que la Côte d'Ivoire avance dans la bonne direction dans la mise en œuvre de ces conventions. Donc nous restons ouverts à tout partenariat pour amplifier toutes ces actions. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. This is extremely helpful and really insightful in terms of understanding your whole of government approach that you've had to deal with this. I come to you, Minister Beringer. You come from a very beautiful island, and unfortunately, most islands have the complexity of dealing with the pollution and climate change at the same time. So you're assaulted on both sides of the spectrum. Can you give us insight on how Mauritius has dealt with this? Oh, excuse me. I shall give you my very own. You have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, merci madame, bonjour à tous et à toutes. Je vous remercie d'abord de me permettre d'intervenir dans ce panel de discussion. Comme l'a soulevé avant moi M. Fernando, toutes les crises auxquelles nous faisons face sont interconnectées, mais nous ne le vivons pas tous de la même façon. Donc permettez-moi juste de resituer le contexte. Selon l'ONU Climat, nous sommes le 6e pays le plus exposé aux risques climatiques. Donc nous vivons de plein fouet non seulement la crise de la pollution, du réchauffement climatique, la perte de la biodiversité, mais aussi la crise alimentaire. Nos stocks de poissons continuent de diminuer dans nos eaux année après année. Et pourtant, nous ne sommes pas un pays qui est pollueur. L'île Maurice contribue uniquement à hauteur de 0,01% des émissions de gaz à effet de serre, selon l'ONU Climat. Nous ne sommes pas producteurs non plus de produits chimiques hautement dangereux. Mais pourtant, comme je le dis, nous sommes pleinement victimes des effets du réchauffement climatique, de la montée des eaux, de l'érosion. Nos plages sont en train de disparaître, des crues subites, des pluies torrentielles. Nous subissons aussi la pollution de plein fouet, pollution en tout genre, de l'air, mais aussi la pollution marine, notamment à travers la pollution plastique. Nous recevons les déchets plastiques du monde entier. Nos plages sont en train d'être envahies de plastique et de microplastiques. Et donc, notre survie en danger, notre propre survie, mais aussi la survie du secteur touristique, qui est un des piliers de notre économie. Notre sécurité alimentaire est en danger, comme je le disais, nos écosystèmes marins sont en danger, notre biodiversité est en danger. Et donc, nous ne subissons pas les effets de la pollution et du réchauffement climatique de manière proportionnée par rapport aux gros pays pollueurs. Mais nous ne nous contentons pas de subir, nous agissons aussi, nous agissons sur plusieurs axes. Notamment, nous avons beaucoup investi dans les politiques environnementales, y compris pour faire face à l'érosion de nos plages. Nous avons beaucoup investi dans la réhabilitation de nos plages. Puisque nous parlons des conventions de Bâle, Rotterdam et Stockholm, concernant la convention de Bâle, nous avions fait un premier inventaire des déchets dangereux qui existaient et qui a permis la construction d'un centre de déchets temporaires spécialement pour les déchets dangereux et qui a permis depuis 2017 donc, de traiter 3250 tonnes de déchets dangereux, y compris 800 tonnes d'huile contaminée provenant de l'échouage du bateau japonais, le MV Wakasho. Je ne sais pas si vous aviez entendu parler. En 2020, nous avons subi un malheureux événement où un pétrolier s'était échoué sur nos côtes. Et donc, nous avons vécu un oil spill, comme nous disons. Et ce centre intérimaire pour les déchets dangereux a permis donc de recevoir et de stocker 800 tonnes d'huile contaminée avant d'être exportée vers des centres licenciés en Europe. Nous avons aussi mis en place une feuille de route pour l'économie circulaire, un plan sur 10 ans qui prévoit le tri des déchets et qui prévoit aussi la responsabilité élargie des producteurs. Nous avons également prévu donc le compostage avec le tri des déchets. Nous allons donc réduire nos émissions de gaz à effet de serre, même si nous n'en produisons pas beaucoup. Au niveau de la Convention de Rotterdam, nous avons mis en place un nouveau cadre législatif, y compris pour la Convention de Bâle également, j'ai oublié de le mentionner. Nous sommes en train de revoir le cadre législatif pour mieux implémenter la Convention de Bâle. Nous avons mis en place pour la Convention de Rotterdam aussi un cadre législatif depuis 2004, ce qui nous a permis d'interdire l'importation ou de restreindre les produits listés dans l'annexe 3 de la Convention. Et concernant la Convention de Stockholm, nous avions fait en 2011 un inventaire des POPs et cela nous a permis de mettre en place un plan d'implémentation et de nous débarrasser complètement du PCB. Et actuellement, nous allons aussi vers l'élimination complète du DDT. Nous avions gardé un stock d'environ 5 tonnes pour faire face à une éventuelle crise de la malaria, même si ce n'était plus utilisé depuis 2013, nous avons recours à des alternatives. Mais ce stock aussi, nous avons fait le nécessaire pour l'exporter d'ici 1 an vers des facilités en Europe. Nous avons aussi des objectifs ambitieux au niveau des énergies renouvelables. Nous avons un objectif d'atteindre 60% d'énergies renouvelables dans notre mix énergétique, et à savoir que nous collectons déjà le gaz, le méthane avec les déchets pour créer de l'énergie. Comme je disais, nous allons vers le compostage aussi. Donc nous avons des objectifs ambitieux, nous ne nous contentons pas de subir. Nous agissons, mais pour pouvoir atteindre ces objectifs, nous avons besoin de ressources et nous avons besoin de solidarité. Donc c'est pour ça, aujourd'hui, permettez-moi de saisir cette occasion pour appeler au respect de l'équité climatique et à la reconnaissance des responsabilités communes mais différenciées en ligne avec le principe de Kyoto et les principes de Rio et le protocole de Kyoto. Et nous souhaiterions que le principe de l'équité soit suivi par tous les pays, peu importe leur niveau de développement, et que soient pris en considération les émissions historiques. Donc, nous espérons pouvoir travailler en partenariat avec toutes les parties prenantes pour mieux implémenter les provisions des conventions de Bâle, de Stockholm, de Rotterdam, mais aussi pour permettre aux petits États insulaires en développement d'atteindre leurs objectifs, de répondre aux enjeux environnementaux, sociaux et économiques, notamment éventuellement à travers le Loss and Damage Fund qui est opérationnel depuis novembre 2024. Je vous remercie, je m'excuse pour mon intervention qui était un peu longue. Merci.
Merci encore. I really want to thank you so much because you actually bring the element of equity. And as we're journeying towards COP30 in Belém, I'm hoping that some of the outcome conversations here are taken there on the intersectionality, the aspect of intersectionality. Your Excellency, Minister Li Gao, you come from China, and having listened into the complexity of issues around climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, can you give us your experience from China to hear about what you're doing within the policies, domestic policies, but also at the international level?
好，谢谢这个主持人女士，女士们、先生，非常高兴有这个今天的机会来交流分享中国在污染治理、生物多样性保护、应对气候变化方面的经验和观点。首先呢，我想先简要介绍一下中国在履行这个化学品和废物3公约方面取得的进展。中国以人类命运共同体理念为指引，高度重视并深入参与全球环境治理，将化学品和废物3公约作为践行多边主义、合作应对环境污染全球挑战的重要平台。同时呢，我们扎实推进国内的履约工作，也取得了显著的成效。在巴塞尔公约履约方面，中国采取严格措施防控废物跨境转移，自2021年1月1日起，全面禁止固体废物出口，对470种危险废物进行风险管控。在鹿特丹公约履约方面，中国严格按照公约要求履行事先知情同意程序，持续完备危险化学品环境管理的体系。在斯德哥尔摩公约的履约方面，中国严格按公约要求，我们成功淘汰了29种类的持久性有机物，印发了新污染物治理的行动方案，对包括 POPs 在内的新污染物治理做出了全面系统的部署。刚才这个主席女士提出了一个很重要的问题，是吧？我们同时面对这个 治理污染、应对这个气候变化和保护生物多样性的多重挑战。那么在中国呢，我们首先把这3方面的工作纳入我们经济社会发展的这个总体布局，纳入我们的5年规划来统筹实施。这个通过高水平的保护来支持中国高质量的发展。那么我们建立了这个有效的部门的协调的机制，要求各个部门在开展他们的相关工作当中，都要考虑污染治理、生物多样性保护、应对气候变化的工作。那么同时呢，从财政、税收、投资、价格、技术创新、产业发展等各方面的政策，形成合力来支持我们污染治理、生物多样性保护和应对气候变化的工作。那么我们还专门制定了这个降碳减污协同的这个相关规划和工作方案，因为我们相信这3方面的工作是有很多的共同点，通过协同这些工作，我们能有效的来提升这个治理的效能。同时呢，我们认为建立公平合理、合作共赢的全球环境治理体系，不仅对全球具有重要的意义，对中国本身也具有重要的意义。多年以来，我们坚持多边主义，秉承人类命运共同体理念，积极的参与和推动全球环境和气候变化治理的进程。在达成巴黎协定的过程当中，中国做出了巨大努力，也做出了巨大的贡献。同时呢，中国也积极的按照巴黎协定的要求来落实我们气候变化的行动。我举一个例子，就是中国大力发展可再生能源。那么全球在过去10年，可再生能源的价格降低了90%，在很大程度上是中国做出的贡献。我们推动了全球可再生能源的价格的下降，使得各国，特别是发展中国家，能够利用低成本的、可负担的可再生能源，对于这个推动全球能源转型、应对气候变化具有非常重要的作用。同时呢，中国还积极的推动达成了昆明、蒙特利尔这个生物多样性保护的框架，来推动全球合作，来应对这个生物多样性方面的挑战。今年是巴黎协定达成的10周年我们要在这个巴西的贝伦召开 COP30，我想中国将继续发挥积极建设性的作用，推动在这个公平公正基于共同带区别的责任原则的基础上来达成积极的成果。同时呢，中国也将积极的推动塑料污染国际法律文书的谈判，也在这个过程当中做出我们的贡献。同时呢，我还想强调中国也将积极的去分享中国在污染治理、生物多样性保护、应对气候变化方面的经验和做法，继续的向其他发展中国家，我们的兄弟姐妹，在污染治理、生物多样性保护、应对气候变化方面，提供我们力所能及的支持。谢谢。
谢谢。Yeah. No, thank you very much, Excellency. I know that we're running out of time, and I really just want to thank the panelists for such really impressive insight into what's happening in their countries. I understand that there are some pre-registered parties that want to give some statements. We start with Belarus.
Прежде всего, хотела бы поблагодарить докладчиков за великолепные презентации и важные поднятые проблемы. Беларусь выражает благодарность исполнительному секретарю Базельской, Роттердамской и Стокгольмской конвенции господину Паету и руководству конвенции. Мы признательны за поддержку и возможность реализовать проект ЮНЕП создания устойчивой национальной инфраструктуры для присоединения и поддержки реализации Роттердамской конвенции в Республике Беларусь. Мы сделали все возможное и получили очень хороший результат. В 2024 году в Беларуси принят и уже вступил в силу закон о присоединении к Роттердамской конвенции, и проблемных вопросов в настоящее время мы не имеем. Наш национальный орган сейчас осуществляет подготовку ответов по импорту химических веществ, относящихся к категории пестицид, промышленный химикат и особо опасный пестицидный состав. Ответы с решениями, которые приняты на основе анализа рисков, будут направлены в секретариат в самое ближайшее время. Мы заинтересованы в привлечении технической помощи для укрепления потенциала Беларуси в области рационального управления химическими веществами. Кроме того, мы заинтересованы в обучении специалистов, вовлеченных в реализацию положений этой конвенции. Сами готовы представить работу в части выполнения административных функций, порядка осуществления процедуры предварительного обоснованного согласия в отношении отдельных опасных химических веществ и пестицидов в международной торговле. Должна отметить, что Беларусь является стороной всех 3 конвенций. Это яркий пример того, чего может достичь международное сотрудничество. Уверена, что при согласовании с общими целями многосторонние усилия могут привести к значительным глобальным изменениям и служить моделью для будущего прогресса в защите нашей планеты. Благодарю за внимание.
Spasiba. Next on the list is Sri Lanka.
Good morning, everybody. Honorable President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Sri Lanka reaffirms its strong commitment to the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, recognizing their vital role in supporting our development, addressing climate change under the Paris Agreement, and conserving biodiversity. These conventions are well integrated into our national policies and action plans, ensuring environmentally sound management and hazardous chemical and waste. To bridge the gap between policy and practice, Sri Lanka has strengthened regulatory mechanisms under the National Environmental Act, enhanced institutional capacity, and built successful public-private partnerships, especially in waste management. Coordination across the Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm, BRS, and Minamata conventions is ensured through a national cabinet-appointed committee, which now also oversees plastic waste management as well. E-waste remains a key challenge, although Sri Lanka applies the Basel Convention's prior informed consent procedure. The lack of comprehensive legal frameworks, limited dismantling infrastructure, and low public awareness continue to hinder progress. On pesticides management, Sri Lanka achievements have been globally recognized. Since enacting the Control of Pesticides Act in 1980, the country has banned or restricted 55 pesticides, including all those listed under the conventions. These measures lead to a 70% reduction in suicide rates, saving over 93,000 lives without affecting agricultural productivity. This earned Sri Lanka the Global Future Policy Award in 2021. Looking ahead, we are committed to eliminating all severe pesticide-related health and environmental impacts by 2035. Our new National Pesticide Risk Reduction Strategy 2025 to 2030 will align with the global targets on highly hazardous pesticides, ensuring sustainable agriculture and biodiversity protection. Our National Chemicals Management Policy covers all full life cycle of toxic substances, including persistent organic pollutants, polybutylene terephthalate, and endocrine disruptors. Imports of hazardous chemicals are regulated to ensure safety and compliance with environmental standards. Sri Lanka recognizes the complexity of balancing multiple international obligations. For instance, phasing out ozone-depleting substances under the Montreal Protocol supports climate goals but generates hazardous waste, challenge we address through integrated policy planning and substantial technologies. We are committed to empowering communities, especially informal waste workers, through public awareness and capacity building efforts. In conclusion, Sri Lanka stands ready to strengthen the implementation of the BRS Convention and urges international community to enhance technical and financial support to help developing nations achieve their environmental goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid this is all we have time for because there is another panel that is coming through. I understand that you will need to do the statements a little bit later. I want to thank the panelists very much. If you can give them a round of applause. Over to you, Rolf.
Thank you so much, Musanda, and Excellencies. Thank you so much for these very deep and very interesting presentations and discussions on this first panel. As I mentioned before, let's try to keep our statements very short to allow as many ministers as possible to speak. And as you know, we are running out of time. So if we have some time at the end, we will allow Excellencies to take the floor. As you all know, today is the International Labor Day. And it's important for the BRS Conventions, the Labor Day, because its significance lies in creating a safe working environment for workers. And this is at the center of what we do here. So I'd like to wish all of you, especially those who are celebrating, I know there's different kinds of celebrations in different countries, best International Labor Day. I think we have our second panel already set up and established. So I have the pleasure to introduce our moderator, Her Excellency Ms. Aniko Rais, and the Minister of State of the Secretariat for Environment of Hungary. Over to you, Madam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, distinguished delegates and colleagues. Good morning to everyone. It's a great honor to moderate this second high-level panel on the theme of circularity. Today's discussion centers on a concept that is fast becoming the cornerstone of sustainability in a resource-constrained world. Circularity is more than just a waste management approach. It is a systemic transformation of how we produce, consume, and think about materials. It challenges the traditional take, make, dispose model and promotes keeping materials and products in use for as long as possible. Advancing circularity is not just an environmental imperative, it is also a development opportunity. From innovation in materials and product design to regional collaboration and job creation in reuse and repair economies, circularity offers co-benefits across climate, biodiversity, and health. The circular economy is essential for resource security, particularly as global demand for critical materials grows. Implementing the BRS conventions can unlock innovation and resilience in this transition. In my region, that's Europe, and within the European Union, circularity is a leading principle. We function in a close regional cooperation and have laid down common rules for many areas. Among others, product design, compulsory recycled content of certain products, or waste disposal targets. We put the polluter pays principle into practice by introducing the extended product producer responsibility scheme and the deposit refund systems. And with careful considerations and with the help of green innovation, we also banned certain dangerous materials. We strongly believe that circularity is crucial to reach our common global environmental and climate objectives, just as is widespread global cooperation. Therefore, I'm especially looking forward to hearing the perspectives of our distinguished panelists, who are Her Excellency Ms. Fatma Varang, Deputy Minister of Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change of Turkey. Mr. Varang, we welcome your perspective on strengthening the plastics value chain through circular approaches. And His Excellency Mr. Letsema Adonsi, who is Minister of Environment and Forestry of Lesotho. Mr. Adonsi, we are eager to hear your views on improving waste management capacities and technologies. So first, if you allow me, Her Excellency Ms. Fatma Varang, with growing plastic consumption, how can developing countries strengthen circularity in the plastics value chain through effective implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions? The floor is yours.
Çok teşekkür ediyorum. Ben konuşmamı Türkçe yapacağım. Dünkü yuvarlak masa toplantısına değinmek istiyorum öncelikle. Gerçekten çok verimli bir toplantıydı. Birlikte bulunduğumuz ülkelerin üst düzey yöneticileri, bakanları, bakan yardımcılarıyla bir araya geldik. Ve burada edindiğim, bu istişarelerden edindiğim sonuç, gelişmiş ya da gelişmekte olan ülke ya da çok az gelişmiş ülkelerin de plastikle ya da kirlilikle, döngüsel ekonomiyle mücadelelerinin hepsinin birbiriyle bağlantılı olduğunu gördüm ve gerçekten çok etkili bir yuvarlak masa toplantısıydı. Ben öncelikle bu yuvarlak masa toplantısını düzenledikleri için yönetime teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Tabii Türkiye olarak plastik kirliliğinin yalnızca çevresel bir etkisi içerisinde değiliz. Diğer ülkeler gibi bunun aynı zamanda ekonomik ve sosyal boyutları da olan küresel bir sorun haline geldiğini hepimiz yakından görüyoruz ve yaşıyoruz. Plastik değer zincirinde döngüselliği sağlamak da kaynaklarımızı verimli kullanmak ve bu kaynakları verimli kullanırken hepimizin ortak sorumluluğu olduğunu bilmek de bizim gibi yöneticilerin ve vatandaşların da en önemli görevlerinden biri. Türkiye'de döngüsel ekonomiye geçişi sağlamakta önemli bir adımı gerçekleştirdik bu geçtiğimiz Şubat ayında ve bu döngüsel ekonomi ile birlikte hayata geçirdiğimiz projede strateji ve eylem planı taslağımızı oluşturduk. Yakın bir zamanda da bu taslağımızı açıklayacağız, yayınlayacağız. Bu taslakla birlikte hemen hemen tüm bakanlıklarımıza, onun dışında STK'larımıza çeşitli görevler düşüyor. Ve bu görevleri takip ederken bu eylem planı çerçevesinde takip edeceğiz ve bu belli periyotlarla takip ettiğimiz bu süreçte biz artık plastiklerin doğaya verdiği, çevreye verdiği zararları minimize etmek için yol haritamızı çizmiş olduk. Uluslararası arenada Basel, Rotterdam ve Stockholm sözleşmelerinin sorunun çözümünde çok etkin rol oynadığını görüyoruz. Özellikle ülkemizde bu sözleşmeler çerçevesinde önemli adımlar attık hep birlikte. Özellikle Basel Sözleşmesi kapsamında plastik atıklara dair değişiklikleri kabul ettik ve gerekliliklerini de yerine getirdik. Rotterdam Sözleşmesi sayesinde de plastik üretiminde kullanılan kimyasalların kontrolü bilgiye dayalı hale gelmiş, ithal edilen katkı maddeleri ve polimer ham maddeleri konusunda üretici olanlardan detaylı bilgi alma, bunu vermek zorunda oldukları için detaylı bilgi alarak da kullandıkları kimyasalların zararlı olup olmadığını Türkiye'ye giriş yapmadan önce artık bunun önünü aşmış oldu ve biz plastik üretiminin de bunu gerçekten hem ithalatta hem ihracatta artık bütün ülkeler gibi Türkiye'de buna çok dikkat ediyor. Stockholm Sözleşmesi ise kalıcı organik kirleticilerin yönetimini sağlayarak özellikle atık aşamasında çevreye ve insan sağlığına yönelik riskleri azaltır. Kok içeren bazı plastiklerin piyasaya arzı Türkiye'de sınırlandırılmış, bu maddelerin geri dönüşüm döngüsünden ayrıştırılmasıyla birlikte de aslında daha güvenli ve kaliteli plastiğin geri kazanımı da sağlanmış oldu. Bu iki sözleşmenin etkin uygulanması sadece geri dönüşüm oranlarını değil, ürünlerin kalitesini ve toplum sağlığını da güvence altına almaktadır. Diğer taraftan Cumhurbaşkanımızın eşi saygıdeğer hanımefendi Emine Erdoğan'ın himayesinde yaklaşık 7 yıldır Türkiye'de sıfır atık ismi adı altında bir hareket var ve biz bu sıfır atıkla döngüsel ekonomiye ve atıklarımızın ayrıştırılmasında aslında çok büyük yollar kat ettik ve hepiniz de biliyorsunuz 30 Mart dünyada BM'de sıfır atık günü olarak kabul edildi ve kutlanmaya da başlandı. Bu senede geçtiğimiz işte Mart ayının 30'unda çeşitli temsilciliklerde, büyükelçiliklerde, daimi temsilciliklerde özellikle burada da katıldığını ve konuşma yaptığını da biliyoruz. Buradaki yöneticilerimizin de ben gerçekten sıfır atık hareketine vermiş olduğunuz destekten dolayı bütün ülkelere, yöneticilere teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Türkiye olarak son zamanda hayata geçirdiğimiz bir projeden daha bahsetmek istiyorum. Biz içecek ambalajlarında, plastikte, camda ve metal kutularda depozitolu sistemi hayata geçirmek için yaklaşık 3 yıldır çalışıyoruz. Son 1 yıldır bütün ambalaj atıklarını özel bir mürekkeple bunları barkodluyoruz ve çeşitli hem manuel hem de otomatik makinelerle bu yıl hayata geçirdiğimiz parakendecilerin toplanma yerlerinde ve kamusal toplanma yerlerinde pilot uygulamalarına başladık ve il genelinde bunları temiz bir şekilde depozitolu ambalaj atıklarını toplamaya başladık. Depozitoyu bir dahaki yıldan itibaren paralı depozitoya geçeceğiz. Bu yıl sadece teşvik olarak uygulamaya başladık ve bu da tabii sektörün bizden beklediği geri dönüşümde temiz ayrıştırılmış özellikle plastik ve alüminyum ambalajların geri dönüştürülmesi bizim için ve sektörümüz için de çok önemli. Özellikle sanayicimiz için çok önemli, dünya için de önemli. Biz bunun Türkiye'de uygulanan bu sistemin gerçekten çünkü banka olarak da birbirine entegre edilmiş bir sistemden bahsediyoruz. Her atılan ambalaj atığı e-cüzdan şeklinde cep telefonlarıyla takip edilebiliyor ve birçok mağazada ya da bankada kullanılabiliyor. Biz bu sistemi de gelecek yıldan itibaren tüm merak eden ülkelerle, bizle paylaşmak isteyenlerle bilgi birikimimizi paylaşmak isteyeceğiz. Yani paylaşabiliriz. Bu yönde bizden talepler de var. Çünkü bunun bir yazılım dahilinde yapıyoruz. Ve dünyada bu şekilde bir yazılımla bütün atıkları takip etmiş olacağız. Ben öncelikle bana bu konuda söz verdiğiniz için teşekkür ediyorum. Teşekkür ederim.
Thank you very much. If you allow me a follow-up question, that would be as the shift towards the circular plastics economy gains momentum, what opportunities do you see for developing countries to lead by example by implementing upstream measures such as product design, sustainable design you already mentioned, and material and innovation under the Basel, the Rotterdam, and the Stockholm Convention?
Evet, bizim tabii Türkiye olarak atığı yerinde ayrıştırmak sıfır atık projesiyle birlikte başladı ve atığı yerinde ayrıştırırken bunları doğru toplamak, doğru geri dönüştürebilmek de gerçekten önemli. Biz plastik ekonomisinde geçiş hızı kazanırken gelişmekte olan ülkeler için yukarı yönlü önlemler sözleşmeleri özel değinecek olursam, Basel Sözleşmesi çerçevesinde atık oluşmasını önlemeye yönelik tasarım yaklaşımlarının desteklendiği Rotterdam ve Stockholm Sözleşmeleri ile zararlı kimyasalların yerine çevre dostu alternatiflerin teşvik edildiği bir sistemden de bahsedebiliriz. Biz atıkların doğru toplanması gerçekten önemli. Çünkü çöpe atılan her atık geri dönüştürülemiyor. Ayrıştırılıyor belki ama bunun geri dönüştürme oranları çok düşükte kalıyor. Temiz toplanan, temiz ayrıştırılan atıkların geri kazanma oranları ve ekonomiye kazandırılmaları çok daha yüksek oranlarda gerçekleşiyor. Ve biz bunu aslında sanayide yeşil dönüşüm adı altında başlattığımız bir eylem planıyla takip ediyoruz. Ve tüm sektörlerde, tüm bakanlıklarda bu eylemler çerçevesinde görevleri var. Tabii burada Çevre, Şehircilik ve İklim Değişikliği Bakanlığı olarak biz aslında tüm çevresel kirlilikleri de iklim değişikliği adı altında Bakanlığımızın bu kolu altında da takip ediyoruz. Çünkü biliyorsunuz tüm ülkeler iklim değişikliğinden aynı ölçüde muzdarip değil henüz. Türkiye olarak biz Akdeniz İklim Havzası'nda bulunduğumuz için aslında olumsuz etkilerin birçoğundan diğer ülkelere göre çok daha erken muzdarip olduk ve bu sebeple de eylem planlarımızı çok daha erken hayata geçirdik ve takip ediyoruz. Tabii bir konuyu eylem planıyla takip etmek sadece o eylem planını oluşturmakla sonuçlandırılamıyor. Bütün toplumun bu eğitimi almış olması lazım. Özellikle ilkokuldan başlayarak çeşitli dersler koyuldu. Sıfır atık projesi kapsamında ve çocukluktan başlayarak ortaokul ve lise ve üniversite öğrencilerimize gerçekten ciddi çevre aktiviteleri çerçevesinde atıkların ayrıştırılmasıyla ilgili eğitimler veriyoruz. Tabii sanayicimize, diğer sektörlerimize verilen eğitimlerden bahsetmeyeceğim. Ama öğrencilere verilen eğitimler bu yönde çok etkili olduğunu söyleyebilirim. Teşekkür ediyorum.
Thank you very much. And now I turn to you, Your Excellency, Mr. Letsema Adonsi. In many developing countries, waste management remains a significant challenge. Now, what capacity building measures are essential to equip countries, especially developing ones, to implement the conventions in a way that advances circularity goals?
It is important to first identify or conduct need assessment of such countries and then come up with regional intervention measures that promotes upcycling as well as a way of upstream waste value addition. On the other hand, when it comes to issues of chemicals, there should be strong promotion of safer alternatives, as well as technology transfer. Strengthening of legal instruments plays a key role in ensuring compliance. Strong public education is essential and central for changing consumer patterns.
Thank you. And a follow-up question to you too. How can advancements in waste management technologies be leveraged to implement the Basel Convention and foster circularity?
Thank you very much. Many waste streams which are regarded as hazardous can be made of beneficial use through the use of proper technologies. An example of is the dismantling of e-waste and extraction of precious metals used in manufacturing such equipment. In regard to a example of that, if I can just be allowed to do that, we have got an Environmental Act of 2008. Under Section 4, as the Act that advocates for the right is to clear a healthy environment, embracing principles of sustainable development such as the polluter pays principles. The precaution principles, the principles of public participation in the development of policies, plans and processes for the management of the environment. Section 5 calls for the establishment of National Environment Council, comprising of ministers with a state on environmental issues, and the Cabinet has endorsed the formation of such a body to ensure effective implementation of acts. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you. And now I invite the ministers to take the floor for their 2 minutes interventions. And first, it is the Minister of Burkina Faso who would like to intervene.
OK, merci beaucoup. Bonjour à tous les ministres, vice-ministres et représentants à ce panel. Nous remercions le secrétariat BRS pour avoir pensé à ce segment de haut niveau qui permet aux décideurs d'être en contact avec les éléments techniques et de prendre les bonnes décisions pour nos populations. Il faut dire qu'en termes de circularité, l'économie circulaire permet de réduire les pollutions et de prolonger l'utilisation des matériaux. Cela suppose qu'à la fabrication, il faut y mettre des éléments qui permettent le recyclage et la réutilisation. Donc, si nous ne faisons pas attention, les produits que nous mettons sur le marché ne pourront pas être recyclés, ne pourront pas rentrer dans l'économie circulaire. Donc, il faut interroger la science. Les types de plastique que nous proposons à la consommation, quels sont les produits qui y sont à l'intérieur? Est-ce des produits toxiques? Est-ce des produits recyclables? Sinon, il faut y penser en amont. L'utilisation des produits chimiques dangereux dans les processus de production engendre des rejets de polluants très rémanents qui dégradent la biodiversité, contaminent les réseaux tropiques. Ces pratiques ne sont pas en cohérence avec les principes de l'économie circulaire. Également, dans les process industriels, il faut travailler à éliminer au maximum les produits qui ne sont pas naturels et qui sont nocifs. Parce que vous pouvez avoir un produit propre à la fin, mais dans le processus, vous avez rejeté beaucoup de polluants. Donc il faut que l'économie circulaire soit sur toute la chaîne, et non seulement le produit, mais dans la production. Pour favoriser l'économie circulaire, plusieurs actions peuvent être envisagées. Dans le cas de notre pays, déjà au niveau politique, nous avons la Direction générale de l'économie verte et du changement climatique. Dans ce niveau, les concepts de modes de consommation et de production durable sont intégrés et nous travaillons pour la valorisation des savoir-faire endogènes. Si nous prenons le cas du Burkina Faso, il y a beaucoup de produits qui peuvent être mis sur le marché sans passer par le process industriel avancé. Donc on peut partir des produits de la nature pour mettre des produits finis. Donc vous voyez que dans la production, on fait moins de production de déchets. Le produit consommé est recyclable parce qu'il vient de la nature. Également, la valorisation des résultats des recherches. Il faut que les chercheurs, les consommateurs, les privés et les politiques soient dans le même bateau. Voilà, la recherche ne doit pas regarder les privés se débrouiller, le consommateur ne doit pas s'interroger seul. Il faut que ce soit de manière holistique pour que la recherche nous indique comment on minimise le rejet de polluants, comment on maximise la valorisation des produits locaux en fonction de chaque pays. La promotion du consommation local. Donc c'est le consommation local, il faut travailler à consommer ce que vous produisez. Quand vous êtes dans cette dynamique, vous allez produire moins de déchets. Quand vous regardez la délégation du Burkina Faso, si vous regardez les vestimentaires, c'est spécifique. Là, c'est le consommation local. Donc nous produisons le coton que nous avons, nous travaillons à avoir des engrais bio dans la chaîne du coton et les fils de coton sont produits au Burkina Faso, tissés au Burkina Faso, cousus au Burkina Faso et portés par les Burkinabés. Donc vous voyez que c'est un peu fermé. Donc avec la chaîne de valeur, nous travaillons également pour que la circularité. Je vous donne un exemple. Pour les morceaux de tissu que nous avons, après on peut les utiliser pour faire des sacs comme emballage. Donc ça réduit l'utilisation du plastique, donc ça fait une circularité à ce niveau-là. La mise en place d'une fiscalité environnementale, donc nous voulons accélérer à ce niveau-là. Et la révision des curricula au niveau des instituts de formation, pour que dès le bas âge, l'élève, l'écolier, l'étudiant sache qu'en termes de circularité, il a une responsabilité depuis l'école pour commencer à intégrer cela. Comme ça, une fois qu'il est décideur, les décisions sont prises de manière circulaire pour le bien-être de notre environnement. Merci beaucoup.
Merci bien, Monsieur le Ministre, pour votre contribution. Et donc, next one is the Seychelles.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. As a small country that welcomes visitors almost 4 size of our population, the volume of waste being produced annually is alarming. It is for this reason, and for primarily safeguarding our environment, the government is strengthening efforts to encourage investments into circularity. The political will and commitment is there. Although we barely have we have a small scale and light industrial sector as we rely mostly on tourism, Seychelles has recently published an industrial policy which advocates for waste on circularity across all sectors, placing emphasis on waste-based production and green goods production. Another important national document that has been derived is our SDG investor map. This tool highlights investment opportunity areas for circularity in important sectors such as ecotourism development and related value chains. The government has equally implemented more solid measures. For example, launching the Circular Economy Challenge Fund, which is a grant scheme aimed at encouraging young entrepreneurs to join the value chain in waste management. We have recently enacted a legislation that gives tax exemption for a period of 5 years for startups engaging in the manufacturing of new final products from organic waste. The challenges, ladies and gentlemen, remain to make the circular industry attractive and lucrative for entrepreneurs. Seychelles is doubling our efforts, but we still need to implement a robust system of waste management, which comprises of an efficient system of data collection to determine the volume and concentration of waste available to determine scalability and make circularity lucrative and viable. We have to implement standards and policies that will encourage importation of products that can easily integrate into circularity. We need to build waste management infrastructure, example, storage and treatment facilities for hazardous waste that will enable these products to be safe enough to be integrated into another product cycle. Because we do not have any control, we are yet to secure firm commitments from shipping lines to export some waste products, even if in a transformed state, and of course, this inhibits trade opportunities. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the future is the youth, and we need to find ways to entice them and let them be the guardians of our future. Seychelles has brilliant minds, innovative ideas, and so much talent, but we are lacking the technical support to turn ideas into commercialization. For example, we would make significant strides if we have access to a fully equipped lab with the technical expertise that can support entrepreneurs, carry out tests, and do research and development to enable the commercialization of their ventures. Unfortunately, despite our unique circumstances and vulnerabilities as a small island developing state, Seychelles is regarded as high income, thus it cannot access concessionary financing. This further delays the implementation of these important projects which could generate wealth whilst alleviating the harmful impacts on the environment and human health. Therefore, we believe that stronger collaboration between key partners is needed to create a platform to eliminate the boundaries between sharing of skills, knowledge, and technology to encourage entrepreneurship and investment in circularity. If we can make the invisible benefits more visible, especially to the youth, then we will succeed in our plight. We can turn the negative into positive and in the process improve the livelihood of our people. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Then the next speaker is going to be Ghana, and I kindly ask the ministers to limit themselves to a 2-minute interventions. Ghana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. Mine is just going to be brief. What we are doing as a state in the eyes of circular economy, under the Basel Convention, Ghana has pioneered e-waste management initiative, including technical guidelines for e-waste management and formalizing recycle at a place called Agbogloshi, where you find young men and women who pick this electronic waste. And because they need some material in them, they don't have the capacity to extract the copper that they sell for commercial purposes. So they burn them, exposing themselves to the hazards and the entire community to the dangers of what they do. So to stem that, we have a collection center that we provide at the place they burn them, so that when they bring this e-waste, we collect them, give them some money, and then we have an enclosed or a control system of taking the copper for them to use for commercial purposes. Now, again, through the hazardous pesticide regulation and through the Rotterdam Convention, Ghana has strengthened control on hazardous pesticides, promoting safer agricultural alternative to protect soil and water cycles. We have identified and are pushing out highly hazardous pesticides in favor of sustainable options. Leveraging Basel Amendment, Ghana is improving plastic waste segregation, recycling and adopting biodegradable alternative to build circular plastic economy. Ghana efforts to eliminate POP such as PCBs in transformers promote safer metal recycling and residual disposal in line with circularity. The strategy that we put in place as a country is one, to strengthen the legal and institutional framework to integrate circularity into our national policies. Yesterday at the roundtable discussion, the view was that why are we now looking at laws that will help us regulate this? Maybe perhaps because we are not a major contributor as a continent, but the effect of it is on us, and that is why we are now looking at the legal regimes to see how we can regulate the conduct of people in this area. One other area that I think that we are investing so much, even in the limited fiscal space, is research, because you need to have researches conducted to be able to have an accurate data, because accurate data helps you to formulate the necessary policies to be able to stem this. And that is where I think that there's a challenge, not only for Ghana, many African countries, that the private sector plays a major role. And at the roundtable discussion yesterday, the argument was that it is not just state, it is the private sector. The private sector would want to invest in this area based on data, and the data most often is provided by rating institutions. In Africa, we are told they are found in only 2 places, South Africa and in Egypt. They sit there, they identify problems that African countries are confronted with, sometimes through a 3rd or 4th party information. So the investor who wants to invest in this area will be doing that based on the information that is given to him or to the entity or the investor. And sometimes this information may not be, accurate, because you can't sit at a far distance and identify the problems that are confronted by this country through a 3rd party, sometimes 4th party information. I think that that is the challenge. My last point has to do with fairness in terms of the distribution of resources for the purposes of fighting this. And I think that that is where Africa comes in. We contribute less in terms of the climate change effects, yet we bear the brunt of some of these challenges. And when there are resources that ought to be distributed to help us collectively as a global community fight this, the resources that is geared to Africa is limited. And not only Africa, many developing countries are just limited. And I think that that is one thing we would want to be imputed in the final decision we arrive at as far as the treaties are concerned. Because mind you, the treaties come with some conditions. Failure to do ABC, it comes with repercussions. So in order for us to have a fair treaty that satisfies all of us, where we build consensus, give up something to get something, I think that there should be some fairness in the way the resources are distributed for the purposes of this. So these are just my comments on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is the Russian Federation.
Большое спасибо за предоставленное слово. Хотела бы сказать, что по мере перехода к более устойчивому потреблению и производству, где отходы становятся ресурсами, а материалы остаются в продуктивном использовании, мы должны признать фундаментальную истину. Не вся экономика замкнутого цикла создается одинаково. В каждой стране она формируется с учетом национальных особенностей. Базельская, Стокгольмская и Роттердамские конвенции предоставляют основные гарантии, что наше будущее замкнутого цикла будет как устойчивым, так и безопасным. В России реализуется ряд механизмов, направленных на возвращение вторичных ресурсов в хозяйственный оборот и минимизацию объемов захоронения отходов. В целях построения экономики замкнутого цикла утвержден специальный федеральный проект. Целями проекта является сортировка к 2030 году всех ежегодно образуемых твердых коммунальных отходов, снижение захоронения таких отходов и вовлечение отходов в хозяйственный оборот в качестве вторичных ресурсов и сырья. Законодательно в Российской Федерации используются механизмы стимулирования использования вторичного сырья в производстве продукции, а также имеется ряд соответствующих требований. Установлена обязательность наличия вторсырья в товарах, участвующих в государственных закупках. Утвержден перечень видов отходов, содержащих полезные компоненты, захоронение которых запрещено. Оно включает лом металлов, бумагу, электронные отходы, полимерные материалы. Все эти меры призваны способствовать развитию экономики замкнутого цикла. Результатом мер стимулирования является востребованность вторсырья и выгодность утилизации. Что касается проблем загрязнения пластиковыми отходами, считаю, что она должна решаться через организацию системы устойчивого управления ими, а также внедрение передовых технологий. Причем эффективность такой системы закладывается уже на стадии разработки дизайна продукции. Важное место отведено в России механизму расширенной ответственности производителей РОП. Мы реализуем систему РОП и продолжаем ее совершенствовать. Ведется специальный реестр утилизаторов с проверенными мощностями и оборудованием, определена продукция и отходы, из которых она может быть получена для подтверждения утилизации. Мы должны понять, что устаревшая линейная экономическая модель брать, производить и выбрасывать уже не работает. Мы должны перейти к лучшей круговой экономике. И каждая страна, которая внедрила ее принципы, вносит большой вклад в сохранение природных ресурсов и защиту окружающей среды в мировом масштабе. И в завершении хотелось бы отметить важность экологического просвещения. Нужно менять мышление и делать его экологически ориентированным. Поэтому в марте 2021 года мы утвердили Международную детскую и юношескую премию «Экология. Дело каждого». За 5 сезонов проекта поступило свыше 320 тысяч заявок из России и 93 стран мира со всех 5 континентов. Убеждены, что, действуя сообща, мы сделаем мир стабильным и безопасным, а также обеспечим условия для реализации для развития всех государств и народов. Благодарю вас.
Thank you very much. The next one is Germany.
Okay, thank you very much. Circular economy can make a major contribution to protecting the environment and human health and to reducing strategic dependencies on resources also. I think circularity can achieve a win-win-win situation because it contributes to the mitigation of the triple crisis of global warming, of the extinction of species, and of pollution at the same time. And I think real circularity has to assess the whole life cycle, as also the colleague from Burkina Faso emphasized. Safe circularity is a prerequisite for a circular economy. To achieve this, products and substances must be recyclable and knowledge of possible pollutants in products must be available. For circularity, pollutants must be removed from the cycle to ensure that there's no conflict between human health and circularity. So thank you for putting this important issue of circularity here in the heart of this conference, because I really think it's key to solve the problems of pollution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Saudi Arabia. But if not, then I thank you very much to all the ministers, distinguished panelists. Thank you very much for your contribution. Also to you, dear ministers who contributed, and thank you for listening to our panel. And now I hand back over to the Master of Ceremony.
Thank you so much, dear moderator. Thank you so much, Excellencies, and for those who intervened on the floor. I would like to apologize on behalf of Ms. Alice Sudanono of the Republic of Congo, as she was recalled for an urgent commitment, so she was not able to join us on this panel. I now have the pleasure of introducing our Ministerial Interactive Panel 3. If I can ask the Excellencies and Ministers to join us on the podium here. The moderator for this panel will be Mr. Carlos Manuel Rodriguez Chandi, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Global Environment Facility. Mr. Carlos Manuel, you have the floor.
Hello, thanks. Thanks so much, Rolf, for the introduction, and I'm really pleased to be moderating this important panel on the means of implementation. Let me try to frame the topic that we will be talking today based on, I would say, previous conversation that we had yesterday with the ministers, and a few elements are here. I took notes about it. This is not the first time that the COP knows about a report based on the financial needs of parties. Basically, the financial needs tell us that on an annual basis, there's a unfulfilled financial gap of around $5 billion. The GEF being the financial mechanism, and what the GEF does is totally transparent to the Convention, not only because this is the nature of our partnership, but most importantly, we report on a COP basis, not just on our portfolio, but most importantly, we report based on the guidance to the COP, from the COP. That's my first point. Here, we have a top-down global assessment on the financial needs. And this is just a basic reference document of the next stage of reports that I strongly believe that we need to begin working, because the financial needs assessment done by the experts and presented to this convention is a top-down report that tells us about the global financial gap for the chemicals. Now the next step is doing the bottom-up approaches, the homework that every single country must be doing in terms of not just defining how much resources are being invested with domestic resources to implement the 3 chemicals conventions. And I bet my salary, my monthly salary of the GEF, that not a single nation in this convention has done the chemical biodiversity expenditure review in your countries. The chemicals financial review is a basic homework that we need to do to really understand how much each country is allocating domestic resources for the implementation of what we agree in these conventions. So this is the first task in a bottom-up approach that needs to be done. The chemicals expenditure review. And you will be surprised because most of you, ministers and head of delegations, are here representing the ministries of environment. Most of you may agree that there are many other ministries in the executive branch that are already investing a lot of resources in the spirit, in the objectives of these conventions. I bet that the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Industry, and the Ministry of Agriculture are just a handful of agencies from the executive branch that are investing national public resources in budget lines that are positive to the aspiration of this convention, but there is very little knowledge at the country level of who they are, how much they are investing. So the chemicals expenditure review is one task. The second task that countries need to do is the financial needs assessment. The same way we do a financial need assessment at the global level that defines that for the next 4 years, we all need $14 billion, every single country needs to do the domestic exercise to understand what are my financial needs. As you do your chemical investments at the country level, at the same time that you define your needs, you will come with your financial gap. And with that, we can work all together in narrowing that financial gap. The narrowing of the financial gap is a combination of more effective mobilization of domestic resources, new innovative financial mechanism, plus multilateral and bilateral help. And the GEF will be extremely interested and happy in GEF 9 to begin allocating resources for this kind of work. My second point here is that the GEF is not a donor to any country in this convention. We are not a donor. We are your financial mechanism. We're not a donor to any country here. We are your financial mechanism that was created 30 years ago, and we allocate resources and you define how to use it. I understand that is a complex balancing act to be able to allocate resources for CBD, UNFCCC, UNCCD, and then the chemicals conventions. But if you see how the GEF has been programming financial resources for the chemical convention, is together with the land degradation is the area that has had the biggest growth in terms of programming and in terms of budget in the last 2 GEF cycles. So don't see me or any of my colleagues of the GEF as donors to these conventions. We are your financial mechanism. I work for you all. So when you approach me, don't approach me as if you were asking me a favor, because I'm not a donor to anyone here, and I'm the manager of your resources. So the intrinsic message that I'm sending everyone here as we talk about the means of implementation is that I need your political help as we replenish the GEF in 2025 and then the replenishment in 2026. So be close to the GEF replenishment, be close to the GEF negotiations, and yes, very important, be very close to the GEF Council meeting, because with the Secretariat, we implement the decisions that are being taken by you all, the stakeholders of the GEF. And this is extremely important. We will never do the most out of the GEF resources if you, the representatives of the GEF Council and the GEF partnership, doesn't assume full ownership of the GEF agenda. Otherwise, other organizations will fill up the gap and begin defining on behalf of you, all the countries, on how to use your resources that are being managed by the GEF. The second topic that I think that it was very important in our conversation on means of implementation, yes, has to do with the fact that the executive branch, all of you, needs to do work at the Congress level, and they need support. And the JEF is thinking on how we can support the executive branch passing innovative legislation around these topics. And we have a few other topics that will be presented to the plenary as part of the effort that we did yesterday. Today, we'll continue having with ministers that discussion that we started yesterday on means of implementation. One final element on means in implementation is not just the financial element, there's also the structural element. And here we got a combination of representatives from ministers of environment, ministers of industries, and ministers of health. And the JEF looks for more integration across the executive branch so the JEF resources can be used in a more effective way than how they've been used so far. So today I do have the honor and the pleasure to be joined by the ministers of São Tomé, the Vice Minister Ms. Borges da Mata, then the minister from Pakistan, His Excellency Musarrika Masood, and then I'm very honored to have with us the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Environment of Brazil, Adalberto Feliciano. I welcome you three, and then I have a list of other speakers that will address the room. With further ado, I will come to the Minister of São Tomé with one question, and that has to do with us, the JEF. So, Minister, how can the JEF and other multilateral institutions, particularly development banks and philanthropic actors, can better align to serve as catalytic partners in the de-risking investment in chemicals and waste and management? For many countries, the private sector is interested, but at this point, private sector is telling us investing in chemicals and waste is high risk, low profile. So I'm very curious, Minister, if you can give us your take on how multilateral and bilateral philanthropic organizations can really align to serve as catalyzers partners in your effort to narrow your financial needs at the domestic level and do better in terms of investment associated to chemicals and waste. Over to you, Minister.
Merci. Bon, moi, je suis venue pour partager un peu d'expérience de mon pays, mais vous avez posé une question, mais je vais essayer quand même de vous répondre. Mais avant, je dois souligner qu'une coopération et une coordination accrue, soit au niveau national, soit au niveau régional, soit au niveau mondial, sont nécessaires pour mettre en œuvre efficacement les conventions. Dans ce sens, les partenariats jouent un rôle central et les investissements de la société civile, des entreprises, de l'industrie doivent être pleinement impliqués. Bon, par rapport à votre question, c'est vrai que les pays bénéficient du GEF, même au niveau des projets par rapport au changement climatique, par rapport aux gestions des déchets, on n'a pas encore des activités concrètes, mais je peux vous dire qu'à ce moment-là, São Tomé et Principe participe à un projet régional financé par le GEF, qui inclut également Cap-Vert et Guinée-Bissau. Donc, ces projets-là visent à créer des conditions permettant d'améliorer la gestion des produits chimiques et des déchets dangereux et de réduire les quantités et les variétés des produits chimiques dangereux dans les différents petits États insulaires en développement conformes aux meilleures pratiques mondiales. Donc, on est là dans ces projets régionaux, mais pour moi, le plus important, c'est pour moi de partager avec vous ce qu'on est en train de faire. Nous sommes conscients que chaque jour, des mécanismes traditionnels de financement, l'argent, ce n'est pas beaucoup. Des procédures pour l'avoir, c'est dur. Pour le pays comme Saint Thomé et Principe, par exemple, parce qu'on est en train d'améliorer le renforcement, la capacité de notre technicien, la capacité institutionnelle. Donc, comme on est en train encore d'améliorer, parfois on dépend beaucoup des agences des Nations Unies pour avoir les fonds. Donc, c'est un procès très long et un peu dur. Et pour cela, le pays est en train d'adopter des petites initiatives, mais qui font la différence. À ce moment, notre pays est désormais le pays africain qui possède les plus grandes surfaces agricoles dédiées à l'agriculture biologique. Nous avons pu mettre en place un centre de compétences international pour la communauté des pays de langue portugaise afin de promouvoir l'agriculture familiale durable et l'agroécologie sur notre territoire. Donc, les agriculteurs sont encouragés à utiliser du compost organique. Une fois que grande partie des déchets sont des déchets organiques. En mars dernier, nous avons, mais avant de dire ça, je dois vous dire, actuellement, 40% de la production du pays ne nécessite pas l'utilisation de pesticides. 40%. En mars dernier, nous avons créé la taxe écologique à l'importation, en tenant compte de la nécessité d'appliquer les principes de responsabilité élargie. Avec notre partenaire traditionnel, Portugal, nous avons signé un mémorandum qui nous permet d'échanger la dette contre la nature d'un montant de 3,5 millions d'euros, à travers lequel nous créons un fonds climatique et environnemental qui nous permettra de développer des actions en faveur de la conservation de notre biodiversité et la gestion des déchets. Dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre de notre loi sur la réduction de l'utilisation des plastiques non biodégradables, les importateurs bénéficient de l'exonération de réduction des tarifs pour les matériaux alternatifs. Donc, c'est ça que je vais partager avec vous, parce qu'on est conscient que chaque pays doit aussi, au niveau interne, s'organiser, de doter d'initiatives, même si ce sont des petites initiatives, mais qui font la différence. Pour la question des changements climatiques, pour la gestion des déchets dangereux, je dis toujours, chaque geste compte. Donc, on doit faire ces efforts-là, parce qu'on est conscient de toutes les conséquences. On doit penser au futur. Des jeunes sont là. Par exemple, dans mon pays, la plupart de la population sont jeunes. Donc, il faut vraiment penser à eux. Il faut vraiment faire des choses. Donc, c'est ça. Excusez-moi, parce que pour vous dire que je parle portugais. Donc, je suis là, j'ai fait un effort pour parler le français. Le français n'est pas ma langue de travail tous les jours. Donc, j'ai quand même fait des efforts pour partager avec vous l'expérience de mon pays. Et je vais finir pour dire des défis communs, mais des solutions équitables. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Minister. Thanks for that. Now, let me pass it over to Minister Masood from Pakistan. Minister, what are the primary obstacles hindering greater private sector investment in the environmentally sound management of chemicals and waste? And what innovative financial mechanisms, drawing lessons from other sectors, can be strategically employed to overcome those barriers and enhance resource mobilization for the implementation of the convention?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I love the theme that we have for this conference, making visible the invisible. And I think the biggest hurdle that I see is that the developing countries of the world are not visible. I think when I hear this, I am new to this entire debate. But I think when I hear this debate, what is not visible to me are the imperatives of developing countries. And how, in terms of moving our planet forward in a sustainable manner, what kind of voice are the developing countries going to have? There is no doubt that hazardous materials are bad. They cause neurological disorders, they cause cancer, they cause inflammatory diseases, they cause cardiovascular diseases, they cause death. There is no doubt about this. There is no doubt that there is an economic burden of illness on the people, particularly poor people living in developing economies. There's an economic burden on agriculture and food security. And there's an economic burden on economic activities. So all of these economic burdens are in place. And therefore, we must stop hazardous materials, and we must recycle responsibly what is produced. But two questions come out of this. One, if we don't use one material, what do we use? What is the alternative? And if we recycle, then what is the cost of recycling and who is going to bear it? We all know that recycling is more expensive. We all know as of right now, some of the materials, alternative materials, are more expensive. We know that if we want to recycle or stop something, we have to collect, we have to separate, we have to recycle, we have to stop whatever hazardous waste is out there, we have to recycle it, and in that, there's another environmental burden. Because hazardous wastes also come out of recycling. Now we are willing to do that, answering your question, and we'd like to do that. What is it that we don't have? The developing countries of the world don't have technology, don't have R&D, don't have investments, don't have design, don't have production. And when we look at the world, for all of these resources, intellectual resources, capacity resources, and economic resources, we find the multilateralism and rule-based regimes collapsing. And a whole new arena of bilateralism kicking in. So in the wake of this geopolitical sand slipping from underneath our feet, we, the developing economies, would like to know, we want to move forward and keep pace with the rest of the world, but how? Just to give you a few examples, just about 10 years ago, the most disastrous thing to do was mining. And the most promising thing in 2025 to do, and most green thing to do, is mining. So what has changed other than geopolitics? From mining the bad guy to mining the good guy, what has changed? Geopolitics has changed. So what I'm proposing is to make the developing countries, most of whom are sitting here, and majority of the world is comprised of developing countries, to please make them visible in this as well. And please make sure then we set these standards. And when we say this is what is required for us to save the planet and save our own children, please make sure that the developing economies of the world have the technology, have the resource, have the investments in place to keep pace. Because if that is not forthcoming, then, my friends, the developing economies of the world, which are the majority of the world, would be the vagabonds at the periphery of this world. And they're not going to go away. But you don't want to treat them as, what are those called, landfills of the world. So we want to go green if we are truly woven into a global fabric. And if one part of the fabric affects the other part, then it's imperative that while we come up with these standards, we also come up with a comprehensive regime that allows for diffusion of technology, diffusion of research, commercialization, production, utilization, alternatives, recycling, and whatever is required to put this envelope together. I personally don't see it happening right now. We are 240 million people, and we have a total climate portfolio of about, I would say, $350 million. 240 million people, $350 million is not commensurate. It's not going to happen. So therefore, the new standards that the world is coming up, please make sure that they do not become the new industrial policy. If we come up with a hurdle, a green hurdle, a responsible hurdle, then let's make sure that the resources required to get over that hurdle are in place so that we continue to be a part of the world. Otherwise, this would just be a new industrial strategy which would keep the developing economies out somewhere in the periphery, not visible to the world other than at the conferences. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you so much. Now, let me transit now over to South America, Brazil. Adalberto, how can a more integrated approach to addressing pollution, climate change, and biodiversity laws unlock greater financial and technical resources for the effective implementation of these conventions?
Thank you, Carlos Manuel. Thank you also for the BRS Secretariat for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with my colleagues here, Nilda, Musadik, and all the distinguished guests and ministers here. Well, our countries face a lot of challenge. We are facing global crisis on climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, air, water, chemical. And unfortunately, we don't have enough resources and budget inside our countries to do everything. Even when we do have some budget, in our case, for example, most of the Ministerial of Environment budget, it goes, 95% of it goes to fight deforestation. It goes to biodiversity preservation, forests, and while Brazil has been reducing more than 50% deforestation, perhaps one of the single largest contribution to the Paris Agreement on the reduction. Even in our side here on waste and chemicals, we were able last year, in the last 2 years, because of the leadership of our president, to bring 1.5 billion to invest in waste, 500 million just to invest in Waste Speakers Association, something that is on the heart of our president. But of course, there's so much gaps there. But then we see that when we get into some of these more difficult issues like chemicals or pollution, it's not always easy to get budget. You know, it's not always easy to find ways to leverage this money. Of course, philanthropy and private sector plays a very important role. I will talk a little bit later about it. But in our opinion, public money, ODE, multilateral money, in our budget is probably the most challenging one. And here, for example, when we think about Stockholm Convention and Basilea, Rotterdam, we see the example. Supported by UNEP and GF, we were able to update our national implementation plan of Stockholm Convention. where we identified all the 30 POPs we are phasing out and reducing. And then we were able to have good inventories, science-based data to tell us what to do, where to do, and how to coordinate the private and the public sector in order to do it. See our example, our PCB project, also funded by GF. We had the goal of identifying and destroying sustainably 15,000 tons of equipment. 15. And we trained 50,000 people to do the inventory. Then we realized we had 750,000 tons. And even before the project really ramps in and we use the resource of the funding to pay for those PCBs that are more difficult, that are in the middle of the Amazon. They're from public universities or public hospitals. Just the private sector itself already destroyed 250,000 tons. So they did by themselves because of this coordination that the minister had. In this case, I don't think we would have resource from our budget to do the PCB inventory because we have so many other things to do. But it was important because after doing this, we also realized the importance that we also get into some other topics. PFAS, for example, wasn't in our agenda. We had international studies showing that some pesticides, like sulfuramide, for example, would degrade in PFAS. But then the science normally is done at European, in Canada, some countries with different weather. And when we were able to get funded to do local research on the tropical environments that we are in, we realized the impact was even worse. The degradation in PFAS was even worse than what academia tells us. And because we're able to hire the agency, the R&D and research agency of the Ministry of Agriculture, then the Minister of Agriculture was on board with us to do the transition that was necessary. And then we together started to do the first national network to monitor pesticides and PFAS. We were able to approve our ROS normative after many, many years because we were able to show people that some of these chemicals were really hard and then make the case together with this industry to advance it. Also, our PRTR system, our pollutant release and transfer, which we still haven't been able to fund it, but at least it became a priority for us to do it. We also approved a legislation to do our national inventory of chemical substance, our BRIT-style one. And of course, we also didn't have budget to do it. But at least we were able to build a system with the private sector that the private sector will finance and pay for its maintenance. So I think the most important for the governments now, as we lack budget for everything, we know that there's not enough money to do everything we want: poverty, social inclusion, environment, economical development. But I think that trying to integrate these agendas as a more transversal, like we did with the leadership of the Minister of Finance, what we are calling the ecological transformation plan of Brazil, that integrates the climate plan, the new industry plan, and most of the other plans together, we're able to put the environmental topics at everybody else's agenda. So now I have 20 ministers in Brazil with coordinations on environment, and 50 out of 88 programs of our participatory budget have environment. So I think this is the challenge that we have to address, Carlos. We have to make sure that all the public policies in Brazil or in our countries, if they are transportation, they are industry, agriculture, infrastructure, whatever, they have to bring up the environmental agenda together with them.
Thank you so much, Adalberto, and everyone that has addressed here the panel. Two things I want to rescue, Adalberto, from your remarks. One is that, yes, the progress that parties can do in the implementation of their plans for this convention depends so much on doing the financial homework, domestically speaking. I don't know how much of a challenge this is in many countries, but I'm very sure that in many countries, let's talk about climate change, the focal point to climate change and in the convention are people from the ministries of environment, and most people from the ministries of energy doesn't know what an NDC is. And the same thing we can talk about the ministers of agriculture and CBD. Many ministers of agriculture, being agriculture the main source of biodiversity loss, doesn't know what an NBSAP is. And those who doesn't know an NBSAP is the National Biodiversity Action Plans. So whatever effort we need to do in terms of aligning the executive branch around this effort is going to give us multiple benefits. And probably the biggest benefit that will be given to us is decreasing the financial domestic gap as countries began to understand that we shouldn't be subsidizing pesticides and chemicals because that goes against what we have agreed here. So I tend to believe that we have a major challenge in terms of political coherence. Once more, every single country represented here continues to invest or subsidize sectors that are contributing against what we want to achieve here. And I think that the GEF can be 10 times bigger and other cooperators can be 100 times bigger, that if we don't fix the institutional failure and the lack of political coherence at the country level, very little progress will be done. And I think that here in the ministers today here reflects this very clearly. So I want to thank the three of you for your interventions, and now I would like to open the floor to participants in this plenary. I got 7 or 8 participants, so I'll give them a couple of minutes to do their comments or questions. And I will begin with St. Kitts and Nevis. St. Kitts and Nevis, you got the floor, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues, excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates. St. Kitts and Nevis commends and extends its sincere gratitude to the BRS Secretariat and Government of Switzerland for convening this urgent dialogue under the theme Make Visible the Invisible, Sound Management of Chemicals and Waste. For small island developing states like St. Kitts and Nevis, this is not abstract. It is a demand for accountability and action from industrialized nations driving the triple planetary crisis. As the smallest independent nation in the Western Hemisphere, St. Kitts and Nevis is working to transform our nation through our sustainable island state agenda, a people-centered framework tackling interconnected crises, biodiversity collapse, plastic pollution, and climate change. These threats amplify risks to food security, public health, and national stability, demanding urgent action and global solidarity. Yet, outdated metrics like the World Bank's high-income label obscures persistent vulnerabilities like extreme climate vulnerability and the toxic burden of imported pollution, and skews access to concessional financing. To advance the means of implementation of the BRS Convention, St. Kitts and Nevis proposes 3 priorities. First, unlock blended finance. While Jeff 8's US $800 million chemicals and waste funding is vital, SIDS need equitable access, but concessional grants must scale. We call for leveraging green bonds and sustainability-linked bonds to co-finance circular economy startups, such as recycling systems for plastics and e-waste. Second, prioritize capacity building and technology transfer. Last month's regional workshops on climate resilience and GCF access, and next month's Global Sustainable Island Summit, which is being held in Bastia, St. Kitts, prove that collaboration works. These platforms empower regulators, industries, and NGOs to fast-track global standards locally, from the Stockholm Convention POPs management to Rotterdam pesticide safeguards. Third, catalyze private sector innovation. Extended producer responsibility schemes for packaging and electronics paired with research and development incentives for clean tech, can mirror UNIDO's chemical leasing model. And by de-risking green investments, we harness private sector expertise for scalable solutions. Excellencies, SIDS cannot shoulder this burden alone. Let this COP be remembered not for rhetoric, but for binding commitments, advocate for modernizing financing metrics, enforce producer accountability, and amplify SIDS voices. Together, let us make the invisible visible through justice, equity, and unstoppable resolve. St. Kitts and Nevis stands ready to lead. We urge you to act. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to you, and thanks for the 3 recommendations that we received from you. I'll now give the floor to Somalia, followed by Morocco. Somalia, you got the floor, please.
Thank you for giving me the floor. On behalf of Somali government, I extend our sincere gratitude to Switzerland and the Secretariat of BRS for the organization of this conference. Somalia faces significant and interconnected environmental challenges. Among the most pressing are our limited institutional capacity, insufficient national expertise in chemicals and waste management, and a lack of infrastructure to support the effective implementation of BRS conventions. These challenges are further compounded by exposure to hazardous chemicals and waste, which threatens both human health and environmental integrity. Despite contributing minimally to global pollution, Somalia bears a disproportionate burden from hazardous waste and chemical impacts. We call for equity, solidarity, and urgent action under the BRS conventions. Investing in Somalia's environmental resilience is an investment in global sustainability. Hazardous waste management, toxic chemicals, and illegal dumping are growing threats in Somalia. Our systems remain fragile, and the environmental injustice inflicted by the transboundary waste trade must be addressed. We call on this convention to strengthen enforcement mechanism under Basel Convention and ensure that vulnerable countries like mine are not used as dumping grounds. Somalia is committed to building stronger regulatory frameworks, enhancing public awareness, and investing in sustainable alternatives. We are determined to build a future that protects both our people and our planet. We look to you, our partners, under the BRS conventions for collaboration, solidarity, and action to make that future a reality. Let us ensure that no country, no community, and no child is left to suffer the consequences of toxic pollution and hazardous waste. Let us act now to protect our people and our planet. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank you, Mr. Minister, for your remarks. Now, I give the floor to Morocco, followed by Tajikistan. Morocco, you got the floor.
Thank you, distinguished ministers and ladies and gentlemen. Allow me first to express, on behalf of the Kingdom of Morocco, our sincere gratitude to the Secretariats of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, and to the Swiss government for its warm welcome and excellent hospitality. And I would like also to take this opportunity to thank our friends in JEF, because since becoming a JEF participant in 1994, we have that long history of several decades of collaboration with JEF, and the Kingdom has benefited from more than $150 million in grant money. But I want to emphasize what our friend Carlos was saying. This enabled us to leverage more than $1.5 billion of co-financing from public and private sources. To answer the question on how to enhance implementation and bridge financing, growing funding gaps, I would want to rely on Morocco's long experience in sustainable development and in inclusive stakeholders' engagement, and also in our experience of 2 years of President of the United Nations Assembly for the Environment, where we stressed the importance of building synergies between the 250 plus multilateral environmental agreements. So just two key messages there. I mean, the first key message would be around definitely promoting synergies in technical assistance and financial mechanisms. But I will go a bit more than that by saying that we need a better balance between technical assistance and tangible projects on the ground. That should be really optimized to provide targeted technical support and provide us with quick wins, because we are all, as environment ministers, as health ministers, as energy ministers, all dealing with environmental emergencies here. Second key point, getting back to what His Excellency, the Minister of Pakistan, was saying, technology, data integration, the use of digital tools, very critical to increase transparency and monitoring, but also, and I will add to that, that we need to ensure that we target our subsidies and make sure that the subsidies are better allocated for sustainable development. So, in other words, we have to operate at the end of the day like private equity, and we have to be agile, transparent, and have built on quick wins in the multiple projects that we are dealing with. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you. Thanks you, Morocco. Now Tajikistan, followed by Palestine. Tahis, you got the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Tajikistan remains firmly committed to the objectives of the Basel and Stockholm Conventions and is actively engaged in fulfilling its respective obligations. I am pleased to inform you that as of 25th May 2025, the Republic of Tajikistan will formally become a party to the Rotterdam Convention, further demonstrating our national dedication to the sound management of chemicals and wastes. We take this opportunity to call upon development partners to assist Tajikistan in meeting its obligations related to environmentally sound management and disposal of PCBs oils across the country. In addition, we seek support for the safe elimination of over 40,000 tons of obsolete pesticides currently being collected and stored at a government-designated specialized landfill. We recognize the nexus between climate change and various pollutants, particularly open waste, burning, and emissions from uncontrolled sources. It is evident that the regulation of chemical management and hazardous waste is closely linked to the agriculture and food security. Tajikistan is firmly committed to the principles of the green economy and the cultivation of environmentally safe consumers' products. In this regard, we once again urge development partners to consider, along the funds allocated for the climate change initiatives and biodiversity degradation, also consider and provide technical assistance and projects aimed at chemical safety and pollution reduction. Enhanced financial and technical support in these areas will contribute to sustainable environmental management and long-term ecological stability. Tajikistan remains fully committed to strengthening international cooperation in addressing the shared challenges posed by hazardous chemicals and wastes. We believe that through sustained dialogue, capacity building, and mutual support, we can make significant strides toward the implementation of the conventions and the protection of human well-being and the environment. I thank you.
Thanks to you, Tajikistan. Now I give the floor to Palestine, followed by South Africa. Palestine, the floor is yours.
مساء الخير. بداية نشكر دولة سويسرا حكومة وشعبا على حسن الاستقبال والضيافة، والشكر موصول لسكرتاريا الاتفاقيات الثلاث BRS على حسن التنظيم والضيافة وإدارة هذا الحفل. السيدات والسادة، كما تعلمون أن دولة فلسطين انضمت إلى هذه الاتفاقيات ما بين الأعوام 2015 و2018، ومنذ انضمامنا إلى هذه الاتفاقيات حاولنا ضمن الجهود والإمكانيات المحدودة والمتوفرة لدينا في فلسطين إلى إعداد القوانين والأنظمة الناظمة لإدارة النفايات والمواد الكيماوية والخطرة، كما عملنا على إعداد خطة طريق لتلبية متطلبات الاتفاقيات البيئية، وعملنا أيضا على رفع قدرات مفتشين البيئة وعناصر شرطة البيئة والضابطة الجمركية لرفع قدراتهم في عمليات الضبط والتهريب، إلا أننا ما زلنا نواجه العديد من التحديات والتي تمنعنا من الإيفاء بالتزاماتنا الوطنية اتجاه هذه الاتفاقات، مثل إعداد تقرير الجرد أو خطة التنفيذ الوطنية NIB، وذلك نتيجة لصعوبة الحصول على التمويل من خلال آليات التمويل المتاحة في الاتفاقيات البيئية. ولا يخفى على الجميع ولا يخفى على الجميع التحديات التي نواجهها، وخصوصا في ظل الإبادة الجماعية والبيئية على فلسطين وقطاع غزة، مما أدى ذلك إلى تراكم آلاف الأطنان من النفايات الخطرة وخصوصا الملوثات العضوية، وبالتالي فإن التخلص منها بطريقة آمنة يحتاج إلى دعم وتضافر جميع الجهود الدولية، بداية لوقف الإبادة الجماعية أولا على شعبنا في قطاع غزة وفي فلسطين، وتوفير التمويل اللازم للتخلص الآمن من هذه النفايات المتراكمة والتي ستمتد آثارها إلى عشرات وعشرات السنين. كما لا يمكن تجاهل أن دولة فلسطين غير قادرة أصلا على السيطرة على حدودها بفعل الاحتلال، مما يزيد أيضا من مضاعفة مشكلة تهريب النفايات الإلكترونية إلى أراضي الجانب الفلسطيني، وأيضا إلى طمرها بطرق غير مشروعة. وعليه فإننا لابد أن تتضافر جميع الجهود الدولية لإيجاد آلية مالية فاعلة لتلبية احتياجات الدول النامية كدولة فلسطين والأقل نمواً، وذلك حتى نستطيع الإيفاء بالتزاماتنا ولضمان إدارة سليمة لهذه النفايات والمواد الكيماوية. ونحن نعول كثيرا في هذا الحفل للخروج بتوصيات واضحة بهذا الخصوص. شكرا لكم.
Thanks so much. Now I give the floor to South Africa, followed by Angola.
Mr. Moderator, on Sunday, the 27th of April, South Africa celebrated Freedom Day, which commemorates the first post-apartheid elections held in 1994 and the introduction of the new constitution. South Africa's constitutional choice of elevating environmental protection to basic human rights was not common back in 1994. It has been less than 3 years since the UN General Assembly joined South Africa and others to elevate environmental protection to human rights status. Human rights violations thrive if secrecy and suppression of information is rampant. Full disclosure about chemicals and wastes makes visible what could be unknown by some. South Africa has put Batipile people first by prioritizing principles of openness, transparency, and accountability, which are non-negotiables in the controls of chemicals and wastes. It is critical that a 2025 triple COPS should yield transformational decisions that foster a culture of openness, transparency, and accountability by ensuring the right to access information on chemicals and wastes. South Africa adopted both Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions in 2004. South Africa has put in place national legislation on promotion of access to information that is held by public and private bodies, and this is applicable to, amongst others, information on chemicals and wastes. South Africa has domesticated the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions through numerous regulatory instruments. As a developing country, South Africa still requires technical assistance to strengthen the implementation of the above-mentioned regulatory framework to meet obligations. In the quest for promoting sharing of information, South Africa requests a critical list of safe, affordable, appropriate, and accessible alternatives for all listed persistent organic pollutants and agrochemicals and industrial chemicals listed under the Rotterdam Convention to facilitate a smooth transition of affected sectors. South Africa assumed the G20 presidency, which coincides with the final 5 years before the 2030 deadline for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Our G20 presidency takes place amidst multiple global complexities, including climate change, increased pollution, and biodiversity loss. According to the SDGs Progress Report, approximately 50% of SDG targets require sustainable acceleration. For our G20 presidency, as informed by realities of not only South Africa, but also of our African region, we are committed to making the invisible visible. We are seeking to ensure that businesses and industry join hands and contribute to the cost of eliminating pollution through the sub-priority of circular economy and extended producer responsibility implementation. In addition to these, waste management and alternative waste treatment technologies and sustainable chemicals management will also be receiving attention. South Africa has implemented mandatory polluter pay EPR schemes for, amongst others, pesticides and electrical and electronic equipment. In conclusion, South Africa stands ready to work in solidarity with all to achieve equality and sustainability. I thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, South Africa, for your statements. I now have Angola, followed by Iran, which is the last country in the list of speakers. So over to you, Angola, please.
I thank you very much. Honorable ministers and deputy ministers, distinguished delegates, all protocol observed. As this is Angola's first time talking to the floor, we would like to express our sincere appreciation to Switzerland for hosting this important high-level segment. Angola is a part to several multilateral environmental agreements, including the Convention of Biological Diversity, the Kyoto Protocol, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and Basel and Stockholm Conventions. In regard to the implementation of the Basel Convention, we believe that member states must urgently propose effective measures for addressing concerning complex waste streams such as plastics, used clothing, textile waste, PCBs, and obsolete pulps. These materials require advanced treatment technologies which are often inaccessible to least developed countries due to a lack of technical expertise and financial resources. We therefore emphasize the need for stronger synergies between existing funding mechanisms, greater engagement with new emerging financial sources and more active involvement from the private sector. Angola has taken concrete steps at the national level, including the development of a regulatory instrument for progressive phase out of plastics, particularly single-use plastics, though a presidential decree. I thank you very much.
Thanks to you, Angola. And now I give the floor to Iran, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to address this esteemed gathering where our shared commitment to environmental protection and sustainable development unites us in purpose. Before delivery of my message, I would like to express sincere respect for the progress of every nation has made under the framework of the environmental conventions which support all two together. International conventions are important tools for global environmental protection that, through the creation of legal frameworks and international obligations, try to push different countries to comply with environmental principles. I would like to announce that my country, the Islamic Republic of Iran, joined all these conventions from the very beginning and ratified them and have done all its efforts. But despite the measures taken in the country, there are challenges and obstacles to the implementation of these conventions in the country, including financial restriction due to oppressive sanctions and the lack of some of the necessary equipment and infrastructure for reference laboratories. Therefore, with the aim of improving Iran's performance in implementing its commitments and taking advantage of the opportunities of international conventions, it is proposed to address challenges such as establishing and equipping reference laboratories for identifying hazardous waste, organizing international consultancies and workshops, and defining regional and international cooperation projects with other countries. Addressing these challenges requires more comprehensive approach and greater cooperation between developed and developing countries in order to achieve the goals of this convention long-term environmental protection goals. Let this conference of parties be the moment when our commitment to this planet is transformed into brave and resolute action. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thanks to you, Iran. And with this, I close the list of speakers, and I would like to thank the ministers that joined me over here at the main podium for your remarks and participation in this, the third interactive ministerial panel. I now pass it over to our Secretary of the Convention, Rolf.
Thank you very much, Carlos, and also my thanks goes to Musonda and His Excellency Ms. Aniko. We have reached the end of our HLS segment meeting, and before we move on to the closing remarks, which will be delivered by Ms. Inga Anderson, the Executive Director of UNEP, allow me to read the summary of the outcomes of these three panel discussions that we have been following since this morning. We will also try to finish as soon as possible because we will lose interpretation. And then, of course, we have another ministerial event that will begin shortly after. So from panel one, we heard that everything is interconnected, whether it's climate change, pollution, and biodiversity, and must be tackled together. As El Salvador emphasized, we cannot forget about how rain behaves, how biodiversity is affected. Everything is connected. The BRS conventions are indeed central to recognizing and addressing these linkages to protect human health and the planet. We also heard that multilateral cooperation and environmental equity are key to unlocking solutions. From China to Mauritius, countries reaffirmed the need for global solidarity, technical and financial cooperation, and respect for the principles like equity and common but differentiated responsibilities, especially to support vulnerable states like SEEDS. They also raised the issue of having robust national systems, and international support has been essential. Countries stressed the need for strong legislation, enforcement, and monitoring, supported by clear reporting systems, digital tools, and harmonized standards. However, as Kazakhstan and Cote d'Ivoire noted, limited infrastructure and technical capacity make international financing and cooperation indispensable. And finally, for this panel, they highlighted the sustainable circular solutions must be rooted in national strategies and supported by innovation. Whether eliminating POPs, managing e-waste, or protecting tourism-based economies from marine plastics, countries highlighted the importance of investing in safer alternatives, cleaner technologies, and green sectors like agriculture and renewable energy. Moving on to the outcomes of panel 2, some of the key takeaways on panel 2 was that circular economy is a shared global pathway to combat plastic pollution, with all countries, developed or developing, recognizing the need to reduce dependence on raw materials, eliminate toxic substances, and integrate recyclability into product design and supply chains. They also discussed upstream and innovative solutions are gaining ground, such as Turkey's Zero Waste Initiative, new deposit refund systems linked to e-wallets and in situ recycling technologies, demonstrating how policy, technology, and citizen engagement can be combined for impact. We also heard about the importance of capacity building, regulatory frameworks, and equitable finance as essential, especially for LDCs and SEEDs. Countries like Lesotho and Ghana emphasize the importance of legal reform, safe alternatives, fair access to resources, and local entrepreneurship to drive circularity. Youth education and regional action are some of the key leverages for transformation, whether through school curriculum, training, or youth entrepreneur engagement or funds, underscoring that behavior change and innovation must start early and be locally rooted. The urgent need for increased cooperation, coherence, and multilateral action was emphasized by ministers, especially in the coordination and implementation of the BRS conventions. Aligning ministries and executive branches around shared environmental priorities while resisting fragmented and bilateral-only solutions was seen as essential for progress in Panel 3. Panel 3 continued its discussion on financing the future, making the invisible visible. Speakers stress that traditional financing flows are insufficient and declining. Countries are facing severe budgetary constraints with pollution often deprioritized. There is a pressing need to diversify financing nationally, bilaterally, and through private sector partnerships, and to provide conflict-affected countries equitable access to grants and technologies. Incentivizing green solutions and innovation was another important point raised by the panelists, where they underscored that sustainability must be economically viable. They highlighted mechanisms such as tariff reductions for recyclable materials, targeted subsidies, extended producer responsibility, and support for organic agriculture as examples of how countries are promoting greener alternatives in line with development priorities. And finally, on capacity building, transparency and technology were highlighted as the key enablers. Improving data systems, inventories, and scientific transparency is key to unlocking finance and ensuring accountability. Ministers called for enhanced technical support, digital tools, and technology transfer, especially for developing and post-conflict countries, to empower national institutions and drive fair, inclusive solutions to the triple planetary crisis. I hope I've been able to condense and bring out all the main points that were highlighted this morning, of course, which was a very rich and exciting conversation. Now, many colleagues will be asking, what do we do with those? This will be compiled as part of the outcomes of the high-level segment and will be used by the Secretariat and will be used by the parties for us to advance those points forward in our work, in the implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention, especially as we enter into this very important phase of the ninth replenishment of the Global Environment Fund. So the conversation does not end here. The views that you express will not finish here or just remain on paper, but it will be used in an effective manner for us to continue framing the international discourse in addressing pollution as one of the most important triple planetary crises. With those few words, I would like to sincerely thank you all from the bottom of my heart for making the long trip to come to Geneva and for really being vocal and expressing the wishes, the needs, the challenges, the opportunities, and of course the support for the BRS Triple Corps here. And I'm sure our delegates all here have been blessed by the time that you've been spending here and also learning about the work that we are doing and the changes, as I mentioned in my opening remarks earlier this week, that the changes that the BRS Conventions is bringing to our planet in reducing the impacts of pollution on health, on the economy, and on nature. So with those few words, I now have the honor to invite Ms. Inga Anderson, the Executive Director of UNEP, to give and close this important segment in our corps. Over to you, Inga.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. This has been 2 rich, very rich days, and so to the distinguished ministers, to ambassadors, and to all delegates and partners and friends present here, let me say thank you. Thank you to the ministers who made it and traveled here. Your presence lends an incredibly amount of value because, of course, you are leading in this field at home. We've just heard from Rolf that we had a very productive high-level session with significant discussions. And we heard that significant emphasis has been placed on the criticality of taking action on pollution, on the criticality of circularity, and on the criticality of means of implementation. We understand that in the pollution field, chemicals are elements of our economies and they are in our lives. We get that we live in a modern world where they exist, but we also understand that chemicals cannot come into the environment or to interfere with human health, and therefore ensuring that as we get to understand chemicals, understanding also that taking a broader spectrum approach and not necessarily only a chemical by chemical approach, we will better be able to prevent than to cure. And we all know that prevention is the way that we need to go with all aspects that are impacting our environment. So that was on pollution. I would like to speak to the issue of circularity. And here, in this place, I think the point about the triple planetary crisis to a large extent being driven by our unsustainable consumption and production, SDG 12 on its head, if you like. Let us then understand that when we put SDG 12 the right way up, when we understand that we can no longer live in a linear economy, an economy where we take out of the belly of the earth, where we make things that are valuable to our economy, and where we waste them once and for all. Rather, we shall take, we shall make, we shall circulate. And that is the way that we have to think, and that is the conversations that you have had here today on circular economy. Now, to get to circular economy, it is obvious that we need to be very clear about the means of implementation, which is the third area that you discussed. Because of course, technological differences and access to technology and capacity building, and yes, investments are all part and parcel of it. But make no mistake, the absence of managing chemicals are essentially shaving off digits, as we heard from the World Bank, shaving off digits off the GDP through increased health expenditures and through other impacts on the environment. So on circularity, we need to deal with behavioral change, with education, with grassroots solutions that can drive green jobs. And on chemicals, we need to continue to explore the green chemical space, ensuring, of course, that we share what we learn across jurisdiction and boundaries. Excellencies, together here at the BRS COP, you have had a deep discussion. You have engaged across the lines where different countries may stand. And you have shown that when we work in the multilateral setting, that is when we find solutions, and this is therefore the way to go. There is no single country isolated from the rest, and the aspects that the Basel, the Rotterdam, and the Stockholm Conventions address are those that we can only address together. So thank you very much for being together and for being parties to these conventions and for being present here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the end of the high-level segment. We'll be closing. I would like to make a couple of housekeeping announcements. There is a lunch offered by the German government and the IOMC. It's for ministers and other high-level representatives. The venue is across the street where we had the roundtables yesterday. In addition to that, we also have, for those that are interested, later this afternoon, a little bus that can take people to visit the lakeside exhibition that we have set up. The time for the bus is 4:30, and it would be just outside of this venue. So if you're interested and you're not following any other meeting, please do join us. There's some seats there available. Thank you very much. Have a nice afternoon.